Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight is a little different. It's Halloween, and wherever you are, I hope you're warm, safe, and maybe even sharing the night with someone you trust. To mark this strange little holiday, I've collected 20 true stories. Some are unsettling, some are quiet. All of them happened on Halloween, and none of them ever really left the people who lived through them. So grab a blanket, lock your doors, and before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, are you spending Halloween alone tonight? Or is someone there with you, just out of sight? Now then, let's begin. Scranton wasn't known for much these days. Once a working town full of tired feet and early risers, it had fallen into that kind of quiet where even the birds seemed to stop trying. Halloween night brought a little color to the gray, but not here, not in this empty brick shell of the old post office. The building had shut down in August, like most things around here eventually did, and all that was left was one man, one key, and one camera system clinging to life on a wheezing generator. That man, unfortunately, was me. Name's Ray, 33, and too many bills behind to care that I was spending Halloween in a condemned federal building. It was just one more night on contract before the company reassigned me somewhere less dusty. I'd brought a thermos of instant coffee, a radio that barely picked up anything but static, and a folding chair I trusted even less than the walls. I thought I'd gotten used to night shifts, but maybe I'd gotten so used to them that I stopped noticing the kinds of things that should have made my skin crawl from the start. The inside of the place smelled like old paper and wet metal. No heat, no signal, and the only light came from flickering fluorescence overhead and the CCTV monitors lined up behind the desk. My job was to sit, watch, and make sure no bored teenagers or copper thieves tried anything stupid. Seemed easy enough. Halloween wasn't much more than a noisy Friday for me. The first hour passed slow. I checked each room like I was supposed to, flashlight sweeping over moldy bags of undelivered mail and empty shelves. Some of the locker doors were still stuck halfway open, like they'd given up mid-yawn. Nothing moved. I made a note in the log, even though no one would read it. Sometime after 11, I heard the back door rattle. It wasn't loud, more like a gentle tug. The kind of sound you'd dismiss if you weren't in a dead building on a dead holiday with only dying lights for company. I checked the door, still chained from the inside, exactly how I'd left it. I went back to my seat, told myself it was the wind, or maybe the door frame shifting with the cold. There's always a reason. You get through night shifts by believing that you have to. 12:03 a.m. That's the time I saw it. I was flipping through the camera feeds out of boredom when one screen froze for half a second. Just half a second. One frame, but in it, there was a figure walking across the west hallway. Not slowly, not fast, just crossing. He wore a dark coat and something on his face. A white mask, maybe plastic. I couldn't make out the features. But the angle of the head, it was tilted just slightly toward the camera. I rewound, played it again. Nothing. The frame was gone, like it never existed. I told myself it was a glitch. The system was old, and the weather outside wasn't helping. Hell, maybe I'd blinked weird and imagined it. I turned up the volume on the radio, tried to drown out my nerves with static, but I couldn't let it go. I went down the hallway. The West Wing had been gutted months ago, shelves ripped out, mail bins emptied, walls stained with water leaks. My flashlight caught nothing but dust. Still, I kept going. Then I came back, and everything was still fine, until I looked back at the monitors. There, on the screen, at the very end of that same hallway, stood the figure, motionless, centered in the frame, too far for detail, but somehow unmistakable. The mask stared straight ahead. I froze. 10 seconds passed. Then the light above the monitor buzzed, flickered once. When it came back on, the figure was gone. I grabbed my flashlight again, heart pounding now, and stepped out from behind the desk. My boots thudded too loudly on the tile. I swept the hallway with my light. Empty. But the monitors were still on behind me. And as I moved forward, I saw it. On the live feed, my own body, walking the hallway. Same steps, same angle. Only there was someone else behind me. A second figure, 6 or 7 feet back. Close, watching. But when I turned around, nothing. Only air. And silence. I packed up faster than I ever had in my life. Papers went into the bag, flashlight clipped to my belt, keys in my hand. I told myself I was done. No bonus pay was worth spending another minute in that building. While shutting down the monitors, the speakers hissed. A faint whine, like the sound of a tape rewinding, filled the air. One of the cameras blinked back to life, even though I had already powered off the system. Then a still image appeared on screen, the frame from 12:3. Same hallway, same figure. Only now, the masked face was turned directly toward the lens. The sound cut out all at once. The light steadied. I felt my heartbeat echo in my throat. I shut everything down again, yanked the plug from the socket, and didn't wait to check twice. Outside, the air felt too warm after the chill of that place. The parking lot was empty except for my old sedan. I told myself I imagined the whole thing. Long shifts and cold coffee could make anyone see shapes where there weren't any. That was the story I decided to keep. In the car, I texted Mia, told her I was finally quitting this job. She sent back a string of relieved messages and a sleepy heart emoji. Just that small bit of normal made me feel like I had shaken off whatever had followed me out of there. I drove home through quiet streets, past porches draped with fake cobwebs and carved pumpkins that had started to rot. The sunrise broke behind the ridge, dull and gray. It almost made me believe the night had been nothing but exhaustion and bad lighting. I showered, ate cereal straight from the box, tried not to think about it. When I finally sat down in the living room, the world felt safe again. The kind of safety that only comes when you convince yourself you're out of the dark. Then I remembered the backyard camera. Old habit from living alone. I'd set up a motion cam to make sure raccoons didn't tear up the trash. That morning, I opened the app, half out of curiosity, just to see if it had caught me pulling into the driveway. At first, everything looked normal. The porch light flickered. My car rolled in. I saw myself step out, shoulders slumped, bag dragging behind me. Then the footage stuttered. Just a second, as the trunk lid lifted, slowly. From the inside, I leaned closer. A figure unfolded from the trunk. White mask, black coat. No rush, no stumble. It just stood there, still and straight, watching as I locked the car and walked toward the house. The phone slipped from my hand. My chest went tight, breath sharp and shallow. How long had it been there? The whole drive home? All night. The thought hit like ice. The idea that something had been riding behind me the entire time. Silent, patient, waiting. I called the police. Could barely get the words out. When they arrived, I told them everything. The building, the camera, the mask, the trunk. They checked the car, the yard, even the footage. But when I opened the app again, the video was gone. No movement, no trunk opening. Just me, stepping out, closing the door, walking inside. Clean, ordinary, empty. One of the officers gave me a look, half concern, half doubt. You sure you're not overworked? Sir. Hey. Then second, to do them, and the naughty digs axes. I forced a laugh, said I probably was. But as they left, the screen caught my reflection in the glass door. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw a pale shape behind me, just out of frame. I unplugged the camera that night. Didn't sleep. Haven't checked the feed since. Still, every morning when I get into my car, I glance at the rearview mirror just to make sure the trunk is closed. I used to deliver pizza for this little family-run shop in Akron. They gave me the late shifts because I lived closer to the outskirts and didn't mind driving at night. Halloween was always busy with big group orders and prank calls. But by midnight, the rush would die off, and the streets would go still again. That's when you felt the real quiet of those outer neighborhoods, the kind where porch lights flickered like they were trying to stay awake. October 31st last year. I got my final order just before 11:40. A small pepperoni, paid online. No instructions. The address was Maple Ridge Court, number 11B, a cul-de-sac out past the older developments, near the edge where the houses thinned out and streetlights got lazy. Nothing about it stood out, except maybe the name on the ticket. It didn't match any regulars, and it wasn't linked to a profile in our system. Just a plain J, not even a last name. I figured it was a guest account or someone visiting family. So I grabbed the box, tossed it in the heated bag, and headed out. If you've ever had to deliver something that late, you know the feeling I'm talking about. The one where a house is just a little too still, the lights a little too steady, and the door's already cracked open, like it's been waiting for you specifically. Maple Ridge was half dark when I got there. One porch had leftover candy spilled on the steps. Another had inflatable ghosts already deflated. Number 11, B sat near the corner. Lights on inside, but no car in the driveway. The front door was open an inch, and soft yellow light spilled onto the concrete like someone forgot to close up. I called out. Nothing. Tried again. Louder this time. Still nothing. There was music playing from inside. Something soft, crackling, like an old Halloween radio mix. I stepped up to the threshold, pizza in hand. The air smelled like cinnamon and something else. Something warm. It reminded me of baked apples, like the scent had been trapped inside the walls for years and just now remembered to seep out. The living room looked untouched. Not messy. Not cleaned either. Just paused. A small table near the front had a thank you card on it, with $15 underneath, crisp and folded. Beside it, someone had left a Halloween mask. Simple plastic, the kind with hollow cheeks and a grin too wide. Thanks, Jay, was written on the card. I stood there for a second, just listening. The music kept playing, scratchy vocals from the 50s, drifting from somewhere deeper in the house. I figured maybe they were out with their kid trick-or-treating and left the door open for a contactless drop. Not that safe. But hey, not my business. I set the pizza down next to the money. Said something like, "Enjoy your night," out loud, even though I felt stupid for it. There was no reply. Not even creaking floorboards. Just the music. I backed out slowly, trying not to look like I was hurrying. Once I hit the porch steps, I turned to glance back one more time. The lights inside began to shut off, one by one. Kitchen, living room, hallway. Then the front door began to close. Not slammed, not pulled, just slowly easing shut, inch by inch. I stood there, frozen. The music had stopped. I should have left right then, but I kept watching, unsure if someone would come to the door, maybe wave or shout an apology. Nothing happened. So I got in the car. As I backed out of the cul-de-sac, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there, in the upstairs window, was someone, a figure wearing the same mask from the table downstairs. They stood perfectly still, staring out through the glass, and I swear they were looking straight at me. I drove back to the shop without turning on the radio. The streets were empty again, the kind of empty that made your own reflection in the window look like another passenger. When I parked behind the store, I saw the clock on the dash tick past midnight. For a second, I wondered if I should even tell anyone what happened. Inside, the smell of dough and garlic felt grounding. My coworker Terry was counting the register when I told him about the open door and the mask and how the lights had gone out by themselves. He frowned, said something like, "You sure you had the right house?" I handed him the receipt, the one with the address printed in clean black ink. He went pale. "That's not possible," he said. 11B burned down in '04. Nobody's lived there since. They were solding and the drop. I laughed at first, because what else could I do? But the way he looked at me made it hard to keep pretending. I pulled out my phone, opened the delivery app, and checked the order history. Nothing. No name. No confirmation. Not even a record of payment. It only showed one thing in gray letters: drafted order. Never confirmed. Ding said 8. I told myself the system glitched. Maybe pulled up an old address somehow. It was late, and we were all half asleep. My brain wanted logic more than fear. So I decided I was just tired. Just seeing what I expected to see. Back home, I told my girlfriend the story while brushing my teeth. She laughed, said it sounded like a ghost prank, and I forced myself to laugh with her. The sound came out thin. Then I crawled into bed and slept like I had been running all night. Morning brought light, noise, and the usual comfort of routine. I almost forgot until I reached into my jacket pocket for my wallet. That was when I found the $15. The same crisp bills. And the card. The same card I had left on that table. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I flipped it open. "Thanks." Jay stared back at me in the same careful handwriting. I turned it over, and the back of the card was smudged with something black, like soot or ash. The smell of burnt paper rose faintly from it. I set it down on the kitchen counter, trying to convince myself I had mixed it up with something else. My mind started racing with reasons, any reason that didn't end with the word haunting. Then I caught movement in the glass of the stove behind it. A head. Still, tilted, wearing that same hollow grin. I turned fast. No one was there. The hallway stood empty, but the air felt heavy, as if someone had just stepped out of it. That night, I called in sick. I told my boss I was done with night shifts, maybe even deliveries altogether. He didn't ask why, and I didn't explain. I didn't want to say the name of that street again. Weeks passed. I went back to school, got another job, lived normal hours. Life moved on, until the next Halloween. At exactly 11:45 p.m., my phone buzzed with a new email. No sender, no subject, just a single line of text. "Thanks, Jay. Still warm. It is lime. It is Masticall." I stared at it for a long time, my hand frozen above the screen. The same time, the same words. Every year since then, it has arrived again at that exact minute. And every time it does, I remember the faint smell of apple pie, the sound of old music, and the way the light died, one bulb at a time in house number 11B. My name's Amber. I was 27 last Halloween, working evenings at a little salon tucked in the historic district of Savannah. Tuesdays were usually slow, and Halloween falling on one meant fewer walk-ins. Just the usuals dropping by for quick curls or face paint before parties. By 9, everyone else had clocked out to hit the bars in costume. I stayed behind to clean, not because I had to, just because I liked the calm. There was something nice about tidying the place when the buzz of dryers and chatter faded out. I had plans after. Change into my costume, meet Evan downtown, maybe catch the tail end of a haunted tour. Just needed 15 quiet minutes to mop the floor and wipe down the mirrors. It started while I was brushing my hair in front of the main mirror near Station 3. My costume had a red silk scarf I tied around my neck, kind of vintage style, matched the lipstick. I leaned in to smooth the edges, and that was when I noticed it. The scarf wasn't there. I blinked, reached up. I could feel the fabric, right where it was supposed to be, but in the reflection, my neck was bare. I remember saying out loud, "What the hell?" in this small voice that sounded like someone else. I tugged the scarf loose, held it up, then tied it back. Checked again. Nothing. The mirror just showed me without it, like some detail had been edited out. I chalked it up to the light. That mirror had a weird angle, and the bulbs above it were old, flickering a little since summer. Maybe the red didn't catch right. The glass had some fine scratches too, made everything look a bit soft around the edges. I kept working, moved to the front counter to close out the till, then grabbed a broom and started sweeping. The place smelled like hairspray and lemon cleaner, comforting in its own way. Then the light above chair 5 blinked hard. It was a strong flicker, the kind that makes you stop mid-step. I turned to check the panel, but nothing looked off. When I glanced at the big wall mirror again, I nearly dropped the broom. In the reflection, I was still sitting in the chair. I hadn't sat down in at least 10 minutes. But there I was, me, in the mirror, facing forward, hands in my lap, head tilted slightly to the right. I looked behind me. The chair was empty. I stared at the mirror again. The reflection still sat there. Then, slowly, it stood up. I blink, and now the reflection matches me. My heart raced. I laughed a little, out of instinct. A short, breathy sound, meant to convince myself I was imagining things. I finished sweeping without glancing back. But the silence felt heavy now, like the building was holding its breath. I told myself I needed to leave. Just throw on my costume, wipe down the front desk, and go. At the mirror again, I stepped in close, inches away. I could see the pores on my skin, the little crease above my eyebrow. I whispered, "Enough." His ways malls. The reflection blinked. Not with me. Not at the same time. I jumped back, knocking over a tray of brushes. They clattered across the floor, loud against the tile. As I bent to gather them, I felt something close behind me. A small exhale, warm and right by my ear. And then, laughter. Quick. Female. Familiar. But when I stood up, the salon was empty. I changed in record time, tossed my costume on without checking the mirror again. Every time I looked at it, I felt like I was being watched from the wrong side of the glass, like the reflection had grown tired of copying and started waiting instead. I turned off the lights and locked the back door, trying not to look at anything that could show my face. As I stepped out into the night air, something made me glance back at the front window. The glass was dark, but I saw the shape of someone standing inside. Same height, same hair, same jacket. Only I was out on the sidewalk. The image vanished the second I blinked. I don't remember the walk to the bar, just the steady rush of blood in my ears. Evan greeted me with a smile and a drink, and I forced myself to smile back. I didn't tell him anything. Not right away. We talked about music and laughed at some guy dressed like a vending machine. I tried to act normal. I kept telling myself the mirror thing would fade with the crowd and the lights and the sound, that it had just been leftover stress from a long shift. Later, Evan pulled me in close and said, "Let's take a photo." He held up his phone, arms stretched, both of us leaning into the lens with silly grins. A bar light flickered behind us. I could see the reflection in the window over his shoulder. He clicked the shutter. When we checked the photo, I stopped breathing. Behind me, just outside the reflection's frame, there was someone else. A figure inside the salon. They had my face, but the skin under their nose was streaked with red. A thin line of blood, running down to the mouth. I dropped the phone. Evan picked it up, confused, asking if I was okay. I said I needed air. I didn't tell him the truth. I never went back to that salon. I didn't even collect my tips from that night. Now, at home, I keep the mirrors covered in my bedroom. I tell people it's a style choice. They don't need to know why. But sometimes, late at night, I test them. Just a second. Just a glance. I look at my reflection and wait to see if it blinks with me. Because every now and then, only when it thinks I am not watching, I swear it does not. It waits. Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. Last Halloween, we thought we were being clever. A 3-hour live stream from a place nobody dared spend the night. An abandoned crematory site west of Lubbock, long since swallowed by dust and dry hills. The kind of idea that sounds fun until the sun goes down. We set up our tent by the edge of the old brick structure and watched the bars on our phones bounce between weak and weaker. There were 3 of us. Me, Casey, 25. Had done a dozen paranormal clips before, but nothing serious. Dev, the skeptic, always joking, always rational. And Jordan, who loved to poke fun but got quiet around real silence. We brought a GoPro, a couple of headlamps, a small camping rig with battery packs, and enough snacks to make it seem like a sleepover. The goal was simple: survive the full stream from 9 to midnight, upload the best bits the next day, and maybe ride a wave of Halloween clicks. We opened the feed right at 9. Comments trickled in, familiar usernames, a few jokes, some dares. For the first hour, nothing happened. The connection was jittery but held. Crickets chirped. Wind moved in dry bursts across the gravel. We told stories, drank cheap energy drinks, and laughed louder than we needed to. Then came 10:04 p.m. Someone in the chat typed, "Who's standing behind Jordan?" Dagden never whitey. We all looked at each other. Then at the screen. There was nothing there. But the comments kept coming. Faster this time. Check the back wall. Ed Jastru. I swear I saw something move. We elected there. Rewind. Look left. Bye. Dev paused the feed. It scrubbed back a few seconds. At first, it looked normal. Just Jordan talking, gesturing with his hands. But then the frame stuttered. A shape appeared near the crumbled wall. Thin, upright, head tilted slightly. Jordan spun around in real time, shining his light at the exact spot. Nothing. He laughed, forced and loud. "You people are tripping," he said, but his grip on the flashlight was tighter than before. We kept going, though the wind seemed to pick up after that. A dry hiss across the rocks. At 10:37, a crackling noise came through the stream. A low pulse, like static that knew where it was going. Every time we heard it, the signal dropped for a second. Dev said it was interference. Jordan said it was wind. I didn't say anything. Around 11:12, it got worse. We were sitting by the tent, mid-conversation, when footsteps crunched across the dead ground just outside our ring of light. 3 clear steps, slow and evenly spaced. We froze. Jordan shot up, light swinging, and shouted, "Hey!" into the dark. No answer. He ran toward the sound, boots kicking up dust. I stayed with the gear, watching his figure disappear beyond the circle of our lamps. He came back 2 minutes later, breath short. "Nothing out there," he muttered, but his eyes looked too wide. That was when we realized the GoPro was no longer mounted. It had fallen on its side, half buried in gravel. Dev picked it up and replayed the last clip. 7 seconds. Glitched and warped, like the lens was underwater. A face pressed against the camera. Not a full face. Just dark features smeared with motion. Too close. Like someone breathing through the glass. I remember Dev whispering, "What the hell is that?" Bertid. I had no answer. Only the cold feeling that something had been too close. Closer than we'd ever know. And the worst part, it had looked right into the lens. Dev wanted to cut the stream right there. Said it wasn't worth pushing our luck. Not if people were showing up or messing with us. But I told him no. We had to hit the full 3 hours. We were too close. And without it, we had nothing to post. Nothing to show for the night. That was when my phone lit up. I hadn't touched it. No one had. But the screen opened on its own, and a video began to play. The exact GoPro clip of that face, breathing against the lens. The volume was low, but the breath felt loud, felt personal. I fumbled to close the app, my hands shaking harder than I wanted them to. Jordan was pacing now. He didn't say anything at first, just zipped up his bag with this angry kind of panic. Then he said, "I'm walking to the car. I don't care if it's a mile. I'm done." "Fine." "Where?" Dev tried to stop him, told him to wait. But Jordan didn't look back. He walked straight out into the dark, headlamp swinging side to side like a loose pendulum. And then he was gone. The air changed after that. Heavier, thicker. Every now and then we'd hear static again, like something trying to push through. Dev started messing with the hotspot, trying to reconnect the feed. I checked the live stream from my end. The screen was black. Just black. Except for one line at the bottom. Viewers, 1. I stared at that for a long time. We were not broadcasting. We were not connected. But someone was still watching. I opened my camera archive. Needed to know what we had, if anything had actually recorded. There was one file I didn't remember starting, 30 seconds long. I tapped play. It showed me and Dev, sitting side by side, talking like normal. Only, I wasn't talking. I wasn't moving at all. The version of me in the clip just stared straight ahead. No blinking. No speaking. Just this fixed stare at the camera. I felt myself go cold. I looked up to show Dev. He was gone. No voice. No footsteps. Just gone. I stood up too fast and nearly tripped over my own bag. The tent flap moved like someone had just left through it, but there was no sound. No echo. Only the wind, now stronger, brushing across the dry grass. And then I heard it. A whisper, coming from the open doorway of the brick structure behind us. "You're live now." And is in the self. I don't remember what happened after that. They said I made it back to town, on foot. Dev and Jordan came back too, a few hours later. No one explained why we all left separately. We haven't spoken since. But a week later, a new file showed up on my phone. I didn't download it. I didn't record it. It was named Final 3 Hours. MP4. It won't play. It just crashes every time I try to open it. But the preview thumbnail shows a frame from inside that structure. I'm standing there, back turned, still, alone, looking in. My name is Harold Wicks. I was born in Wilburn Pines, a small town curled against the base of the Oregon woods, where the rain never quite stopped and everything smelled faintly of moss and old lumber. I'm 77 now, and I have not set foot in that town since I was 18. Not because I hated it. Not because I outgrew it. I left because of Halloween, 1965. I have never told anyone this story. Not because I was afraid, but because, for a long time, I didn't know if it even happened. I was 17 that year. Halloween in Wilburn Pines was simple back then. Kids in paper masks. Adults passing cider in folding chairs outside the community center. Jack-o'-lanterns lining the sidewalk from one end of Main Street to the other. I remember walking my girlfriend home after the bonfire. We stood on her porch, just talking, watching other teens run past in cheap costumes. And then everything went quiet. Not just the street, not just the porch. All of it. The music stopped. The laughter vanished. The leaves overhead went still, and the wind dropped away like someone had turned off the sky. I looked up. Every porch light and window across the street flickered once and then died, all at the same time, like the entire town had exhaled and shut its eyes. That's where my memory ends. From that moment, I remember nothing until morning. I woke on my living room couch, shoes still on, shirt wrinkled. I blinked at the ceiling fan above me, wondering if I had gotten sick or fainted. In the kitchen, I heard the sound of bacon on the stove and my mother humming softly, like nothing strange had ever happened. I asked her, "Who brought me home last night?" "We're also well day." She didn't look up from the pan. "You didn't go anywhere." "Harold." "The never call." But I knew I had. I went out that morning, asking neighbors if they remembered anything unusual from the night before. Most shrugged. A few tilted their heads and said they must have gone to bed early. I kept hearing the same thing. "Must have been a quiet one this year." That were Grayman. Too quiet, I wanted to say, but I didn't, because none of them acted like they had forgotten. They acted like there was nothing to remember. That was worse. I spent the rest of that week trying to piece together something. Anything. But it was like my memories had a hole burned through them. No pain. No trauma. Just silence. Only one person gave me a different answer. Mr. Caro, my old history teacher, was retired by then. Lived alone on the north end of town, behind a gate. He kept bolted even in daylight. I knocked. He opened the door 2 inches and stared at me like he already knew why I was there. I was awake too, he said. I asked him what he meant. He said, "Every 20 years, Wilburn Pines goes quiet. Halloween night, 9 to midnight. Some say it's tradition. Some say it's protection. But a few of us stay awake through it. Not many. And I'll tell you this, Harold." He leaned closer. "Don't be proud to be one of them." And seeing towels. Then he shut the door. And that was the last I heard about it from anyone. But the feeling never left me. That night left something behind, even if I could not say what. It was not fear. Not really. It was the kind of space you feel when something has been removed. A blank between seconds. A breath held too long. And no one else seemed to notice it had ever been there. I left Wilburn Pines the following spring. Told my parents I was taking a scholarship in Eugene. But truth was, I didn't apply anywhere else. I just needed distance. I never said goodbye to Mr. Caro. Never asked my girlfriend what she remembered, if she remembered anything at all. But every year after that, when Halloween came around, I'd feel it again. Not fear. Not exactly. More like a tremor inside my sleep. I would dream of that porch, of the streetlights going dark all at once, of the clock hands stopping at 9 and refusing to move. And always, a knock on the old front door. 3 soft taps. Measured. Patient. It was never the door of any place I lived after leaving. It was always that same one from Wilburn Pines. Chipped green paint. Creaky hinge. The door to a house I hadn't entered in 60 years. I would wake up every time with a film of cold sweat and a mark on my wrist. Faint. Round. Like a fingertip pressed gently into glass and left just long enough to leave a fogged outline. It never hurt. It just reminded me that something had touched me. Something still remembered. 3 years ago, after decades of silence, I drove back. I told myself it was just curiosity. Wilburn Pines was barely there anymore. Most of the storefronts were boarded up. Trees had swallowed the edge of the road where we used to ride bikes. I parked across from the old library. The door was unlocked, though it creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, I found a microfilm reader in the corner, and, after a few tries, I loaded the reel for November 1st, 1965. The front page headline read, "Silent Hour Tradition Marks 5th Year." Is A1. Town observes peaceful Halloween with full participation in quiet interval. No incidents reported. And I read it twice. It wasn't the silence that rattled me. It was how casually it was written. Like the entire town had just agreed to forget, not out of fear, but because it was easier than remembering. But that was not the part that stopped me cold. At the bottom of the article was a photo. A grainy wide shot of Main Street, just before midnight. Most of the windows were dark. The town looked asleep. And there, in the bottom corner of the frame, nearly swallowed by shadow, was a figure standing at the edge of the sidewalk. Me, 17-year-old me, staring directly at the camera. But I had no memory of ever standing there. I had no memory of that photo being taken, or of what happened in those 3 missing hours. Now I live hundreds of miles away. A quiet apartment. No porch. No street lamps outside. But every Halloween, no matter what I do, no matter how I try to prepare, the clock in my living room stops at exactly 9 p.m. I have replaced it, rewired it, even changed the battery on the hour itself. Still, it freezes. I do not know if I was chosen, or if I was simply one of the unlucky ones who did not forget. But if this Halloween, at 9 o'clock sharp, the world around you feels too still, too quiet, just take a picture. And later, when you look at it again, see if you are where you remember being, or if something else is standing there instead. You see that? Mark tilted his head toward the second tower, his breath curling in the cold air. They said it's been finished since July, but still not a soul living in it. Things no down, and waiting the prez. The building stood like a clean skeleton in the dark. Its glass windows, spotless but hollow, watching back with nothing behind them. Jenna hugged her coat tighter and nodded. I heard the rent's dirt cheap, too. Weird, no one's taken it. He's no down. We had wandered there out of boredom. Really? Halloween in Aurora was cold this year, the kind that presses into your teeth when you talk. Most of the neighborhood kids were already indoors. Porch lights off. Jack-o'-lanterns long snuffed. The new development sat on the edge of town like a forgotten thought. 5 identical towers lined up neatly, all waiting for tenants that never came. I remember thinking how empty it sounded. Not quiet, empty. There were motion lights along the walkways that blinked on a little late, after you'd already stepped into the dark. No voices. No TVs. No music. Just concrete and frost. As we passed Tower 2, something caught our eyes. A window on the 3rd floor flashed with light, like someone had strung up birthday bulbs inside. Then came the sound. Laughter. Not wild, fun laughter, but the kind you'd hear on a children's toy, looping the same 5 seconds over and over. Mark stopped walking. Someone's got kids up there. Yes. I shook my head. No one's living here. Remember. It's that Joyner was. He said maybe construction workers were testing the wiring, or maybe someone was squatting. I was about to agree with him just to move on when all the lights went out at once. Not just the party lights. Everything. And here's where I say something to you, whoever's listening. If a place looks like it doesn't want to be lived in, believe it. Some buildings aren't waiting for people. They're waiting for something else to be sealed in. We stood there for a moment. The wind had stopped. You could feel that kind of hush you only notice when it's completely unnatural. Jenna looked up again and said, barely loud enough to hear, no one's throwing a party in a dead building. Right. A delugo. A delugo. I don't know what made us go to the security office. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way the darkness felt thicker around that tower. The security hut was small, lit by a single bulb, and smelled like paper and old batteries. A man in his 60s sat flipping through a logbook, his radio barely crackling. Mark asked him if anyone had access to Tower 2. The man didn't look up at first, just kept writing in that slow, neat script. Nope, he said. Main power's not even live yet in that one. Everything's sealed. Room 304 is still padlocked from the inside. No one's ever picked up a key. Idnotly, I asked about the lights we saw, and the laughter. He didn't answer right away, just reached for the monitor, clicked through the camera feeds one by one. Grainy footage flickered into view, front entrances, hallways, elevator bays. When he switched to the 3rd floor of Tower 2, I saw it. A girl. 4 seconds. That's all she was there for. A child in a tattered princess dress, standing still in the middle of the hallway, head tilted, no movement, no sound, just watching the door to room 304 like she was waiting for it to open. Then she was gone. The guard stared at the screen, then slowly sat back. "Was that from now?" Mark whispered. The man didn't answer. He clicked back, but the feed was empty again. Jenna and I said nothing. But something in me had shifted. The kind of shift you don't feel until you try to look away and realize you can't. Mark was the first to speak after we left the booth. That feed had to be old. Maybe a test loop or something. He didn't sound convinced. And I didn't blame him. My hands were still cold, but not from the weather anymore. The guard had told us something on the way out, almost like an afterthought. Said there was a girl who died during construction last year. Got stuck inside the freight elevator shaft when a panel failed. No one found her for 3 days. Her name wasn't on any public record. He said, "Not officially. Revenge self." We didn't say much walking back to the car. But every time I turned to look at the building, that third-floor window stayed burned into my memory. Mark reached for the door handle, then froze. "Jen," he said, "it's blinking again." In Saul tins. I followed his gaze. Room 304. The window. Light flashed 3 times. Slow and deliberate. Pause. Then darkness. Just like before. At home, we tried to shake it off. Watched a movie. Ordered takeout. But when I looked through my phone, I noticed the last set of photos we took that night. We had snapped a few outside the building, mostly for fun. One selfie had the whole tower behind us. In that one photo, up on the 3rd floor, barely visible behind the glass, was a small figure, standing perfectly still, the shape of a child. Her features were smeared, like the lens refused to focus. But her eyes were black, not dark, black like holes cut out of the picture. Mark said nothing for a long time. Then he deleted the photo. "Glitch," he muttered. But he didn't open his camera app again all night. The next morning, he left early. Said he was going back. I tried to stop him, but I could tell he wasn't really hearing me. He needed to see it in daylight. Needed proof that what we saw wasn't real. He texted once when he got there. Said the security booth was staffed, but it was a different guy. A younger one. Told Mark no one named George had worked night shifts in months. Mark went quiet after that. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Then I got the final message. "I'm at 304. The window's clear, but I'm gonna try to look inside. He's when you wider." I didn't hear from him after that. He told me later what happened. In pieces. He had walked up to the tower, heart pounding, climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight in hand, reached the 3rd floor. The hallway was colder than the others. Not just temperature. Something in the air made it harder to move. He leaned against the door to 304 and raised his phone and pressed the camera against the glass. For a moment, all he saw was the reflection of his own face. Then something flickered. The light inside comes on. Bright. Sudden. Mark stumbles back. Every light along the hallway bursts awake. One after another. He hears laughter. That same recorded loop. Too loud. Too close. It cuts off mid-giggle. He runs. Doesn't stop until he's outside. But the worst part, he said, was what he saw on the video later. After he caught his breath. The recording looked normal at first. Blurry glass. His own face. The empty hallway. But right before he drops the phone, a message flashes at the bottom of the screen. Faint. Like it was burned in by a dying bulb. Still playing. Still waiting. That ended. He deleted the video. Threw the phone in the river 2 days later. Never replaced it. As for me, I still see light sometimes. Blinking 3 times in perfect rhythm. parking garage sensors, elevator panels, holiday string lights. And every time, my whole body freezes, like something invisible just touched my spine. Last week, I got a text from an unknown number. No name, no message history. Just one sentence. 304 is still empty. But the lights work just fine. Angry one. I had just finished dinner at a little roadside joint west of Great Bend. Halloween meant nothing to folks like me. While everyone else was passing out candy or watching horror movies with their kids, I was fueling up for another 4-hour stretch toward Topeka. The sky was clear. The road was empty. And I had nothing but AM radio and a warm thermos of coffee for company. The truck purred along the highway as the miles slipped behind me. Somewhere, past mile marker 42, I spotted something up ahead. At first I thought it might be a deer or a downed sign, but as the lights swept over the shoulder, I saw her. A small figure standing motionless by the road. She looked about 9 or 10, dressed in a faded witch costume. The pointed hat was slouched to one side, and she held a cloth bag close to her chest. I slowed the truck almost instinctively. There were no houses nearby, no porch lights, no trick-or-treaters this far out. I pulled over, flipped on the hazards, and rolled down the passenger window. "Hey, kiddo," I called. "Where's your house?" "All good, bye." She didn't answer, just stared straight ahead like she hadn't heard me. I don't know what got into me, but I opened the door anyway. She climbed in without a word. The dome light flickered on, and I saw her face. Pale, round, and blank. She looked more like a wax figure than a living child. But I told myself she was just cold, maybe in shock. I started driving again, keeping my eyes on the road while sneaking glances at her. She gripped the bag in her lap like it was the only thing she had left in the world. To break the silence, I turned on the CB chatter. Just some local truckers, swapping weather reports and ghost stories. "You get lost out here, sweetheart?" I asked. She gave the smallest nod, didn't look at me, didn't blink. The bag in her lap looked worn. One corner was torn open, and I thought I saw wrappers sticking out. But when we hit a bump and it tilted slightly, I realized it wasn't candy inside. Just a hand-carved wooden doll. Its paint was faded and chipped. Someone had scratched a smile on it with a blade. A part of me wanted to ask more. Who she was, where her parents were. But the way she sat, too still, too quiet, made the words die in my throat. The air inside the cabin felt thicker than it should have. I drove another 20 minutes and pulled into the parking lot of a small-town sheriff's office. Lights were on, but the place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. I told her, gently, "We're going to find someone to help." "Okay." Still, not a word. Inside, I found a middle-aged deputy finishing a coffee. I explained the situation, how I picked her up near mile 43. His face went flat. He didn't even glance toward the truck. Just asked, "What was she wearing?" I told him. Witch hat, black dress, maybe 10 years old. And the strangest thing happened. The man turned pale, walked into a back room and returned with an old folder, yellowed with age. Pulled out a photo. There she was. Same face, same costume, a little more color in her cheeks. But it was her. Name was Emily Carter, he said quietly. Went missing Halloween night, 15 years ago. Trick or treating at her cousin's place off County Road 7. Never made it home. Yes, Waze. The last person who saw her alive said she was walking near the tree line by mile 43. I felt my knees lock. "She's in my truck," I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew something was wrong. Because when we stepped outside together, the passenger seat was empty. The deputy followed me to the truck, shining his flashlight through the window. The passenger seat was perfectly clean. The seatbelt untouched. No small footprints on the floor. No trace of anyone sitting there. He asked if I was sure I'd picked someone up. I didn't even try to argue. My heart knew what I had seen. He brought me back inside. It started asking questions, running my license, the usual. While he typed, I looked out the window toward the lot. My rig sat quiet under the floodlight, engine ticking as it cooled. And then I saw it. The bag. The cloth bag lay right where she had been sitting. I went back out, opened the passenger door, and there it was, empty except for that same wooden doll. I touched it and felt how cold it was, like it had been left outside for hours. The deputy came up behind me, his radio crackling. "You said she was holding that, if you wanted." I nodded. He didn't say another word, just took the doll carefully and carried it inside like evidence. I parked the truck behind the station and tried to rest. Couldn't drive. Couldn't think. I closed my eyes and must have drifted off, because at some point I started dreaming. In the dream, I was back on the road, the same stretch of highway, only darker. The headlights barely reached the shoulder. My rig came to a stop on its own, air brakes hissing. When I looked ahead, she was there again, standing in the middle of the lane this time. Her costume torn, face covered in mud and tape. She raised her hand slowly, pointing back behind me. I woke up, sweating. It was just past 5 in the morning. The sun wasn't up yet, but the sky had that pale blue hint before dawn. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I reached for my GPS to check the drive log, maybe convince myself it was all just fatigue. The map showed a straight route between Great Bend and Topeka, just as it should. No stops, no slowdowns, nothing near mile 43. But at the very bottom of the trip record, there was one extra entry, a single line in gray text. 43, 009, 1 to green, 98, 2000, 952 degrees U. Timestamp, 10:53 p.m. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Then I opened my phone browser and entered the coordinates. The map zoomed into a patch of forest just north of the highway. I didn't recognize the area, but a memory stirred. A news story from years back. That was where they found her shoes and the torn candy bag, months after she vanished. I turned off the GPS and sat in silence. The doll was gone from the dashboard. I never saw it again. After that night, I stopped driving long routes after dark. Couldn't handle the emptiness of the road, the way headlights stretch forever into nothing. But every year, on October 31st, no matter what truck I'm in, my GPS drops a new waypoint. Mile 43, always at 10:50, always the same coordinates. I told the story once to a group of drivers at a rest stop. Most of them laughed, said I needed more sleep. But one old man, gray beard, quiet eyes, just looked at me and asked, "Did she ever speak to you?" There is now, also there's now, and every one. I shook my head. He nodded slowly, like he already knew the answer. "Good," he said. "If she had, you wouldn't have made it off that road." There was that one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. All right, let's keep going. Most nights at the station passed in quiet repetition. I handled the overnight shift at KWIN, a small AM station in Winslow that played classic country tunes for truckers and retirees who still trusted their radios. Halloween was no different. I cued the last track at 11:58, a Patsy Cline song. I had heard so many times I barely noticed it anymore. The station was just a low cement building near the edge of town. One hallway, 3 rooms, and walls thin enough to hear the desert wind scrape past outside. After the song wrapped, I prepped the looped overnight set. Same as always. I was halfway through cleaning my coffee mug when it happened. The music cut off. Not faded. Not paused. Cut. Static hit the monitors with a harsh whine. Not from the broadcast feed. but from inside the studio speakers themselves. I frowned and walked back to the board. Everything looked normal. No errors. The auto playback was green-lit and running. I tapped the mixer fader, tried muting, tried restarting the feed, but the static kept rising, layered with this strange background hiss like someone breathing too close to the mic. Then a voice came through. Not from the playlist, not from any known feed. Just a low whisper, like someone reciting numbers under their breath. 1, 3, 8, 21, 9. In that bass thing. It was a woman's voice. Cracked. Slow. Broken like a tape, too worn to play clean. Between the numbers, something else bled through short bursts of laughter. Not joyful. Rough. Grating. Like someone who had forgotten how laughing was supposed to sound. And behind it, even fainter, was a sound like soft crying. I froze with one hand on the mixer. The voice was not coming through the airwaves. It wasn't being broadcast. It was coming directly from the room. From the speakers behind the console, I pulled off my headphones and it was still there, vibrating through the walls. Okay, I told myself it was feedback, or some kind of bleed-in from a nearby frequency. Maybe some kid messing around with a ham radio, playing a prank. That's all it had to be. But then I noticed the red light above the side room, the one we never used. It was the old reel-to-reel booth, abandoned when the station went digital. That light was on. Nobody else was here. I stepped into the hallway. My shoes echoed against the tile like I was walking inside a bottle. The door to the side room creaked open without resistance. It smelled of dust and warm plastic. And on the far wall, the reel machine was spinning. No power. No lights on the panel. Just the slow turn of the reels, as if someone had pressed play 20 years ago and it had only just caught up. I stepped closer. The audio monitor was live, and the voice whispered again. Eddie, 12, 3. You never leave, do you? Sandra Dahl. My name. I did not move. I just stared as the reels turned on their own, slower and slower, until they finally stopped. I ripped the power cable from the wall. The reel machine stopped cold. The room dropped into silence. I stood there for another minute, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. I grabbed my bag and bolted. I was already halfway to my truck before I realized I hadn't turned off the station lights. Didn't care. My hands were shaking. My keys felt too small. I just needed to drive. As soon as I turned the ignition, the radio came on. Not the Bluetooth. Not satellite. Just plain AM. Dialed in like it knew where I had been. 1203. The static returned, followed by that same whisper. 30. 9. 7. Forever. Forever. Yes. I slammed the power button, but the sound kept playing. I even pulled the fuse from the dash unit. It didn't matter. The voice kept whispering, soft but clear, like it had already nested inside the wires. I didn't go home that night. Ended up parked outside a diner 3 towns over, watching the horizon get brighter by the minute. By noon, I was back in Winslow, sitting across from the station manager with cold coffee between us. I told him everything. He listened, barely blinking. When we returned to the booth, the reel machine was silent, just like it should have been. The dust had settled, literally. There was a fresh layer across the deck, as if it had not moved in years. We checked the system logs. No audio saved. No interference recorded. And of course, no one else on staff had heard anything unusual. I didn't push it, just nodded, cleaned up, and handed in my badge. But part of me wasn't ready to let it go. 1 week later, I came back, not to work, just to test something. I snuck in with an old key card and sat at the board. Waited until the clock hit 12:03 a.m. Nothing. The air was still, the equipment quiet. But that morning, an email arrived in my inbox. No subject, No sender. Just an attachment named Record 1203. Unknown. I opened it using an audio program out of habit. There was only one thing on the file. A single sentence. Spoken in that same ruined voice. If you listen again, we will know. Heavy one. That night, I didn't sleep. 2 days later, I started searching the numbers she had said that first night. One by one. Not phone numbers. Not codes. I tried them as GPS coordinates. What I found chilled me. They pointed to a stretch of desert not far from Winslow. A lonely patch of dirt where a radio tower used to stand. The same spot where, in 1984, a night DJ named Paul Latham vanished during his shift. No signs of struggle. No farewell. Just his last log entry. Time stamped exactly 12:03 a.m. November 1st. They never found him. I stopped touching anything with that number after that. I moved to another town, took a job in hardware. No night shifts, no radios. But every year, just once, my home stereo powers on by itself at exactly 12:03 a.m. on November 1st. It never plays music, never static. Just the same phrase in that broken voice. 12:03. Who's next? In head not about there, in seti nas. People always assumed Halloween nights were chaos at the hospital. They imagined drunken brawls, mask-related accidents, teenagers with firework burns. But in my 4 years working night shift in the ER at Somerset County, Halloween was usually the quietest. Most folks stayed indoors, and the wild ones rarely made it out this far in Maine. I liked those nights. The steady hum of fluorescent lights, the soft tick of the call system, the rhythmic beeping from monitors that filled the silence. It was predictable in a way nothing else in life really was. That night was no different, or so I thought. Around 11:20, I was at the triage desk, updating the intake file. One of the nurses had stepped out for a break, and the other was making rounds. I tapped through the standard fields, sipping weak coffee, until a new row blinked into the admissions log. It filled itself in. Patient 018, Mallory Keene, female, unknown injury, Ada, 11:29 p.m. I paused. Read it again. Nobody had called in an ambulance. No EMT report. No call from dispatch. I checked the external logs and radio history. Nothing. I leaned back, staring at the screen. The file looked solid. No signs of glitching or ghost entries. No corrupted characters. Just a clean line of data, as if someone had manually keyed it in. I even hovered the cursor over the timestamp. The system confirmed it was entered automatically by the intake queue. I figured it had to be a mistake. Maybe a test file someone forgot to clear, or a record pulled from an old backup. But as I reached for the mouse to delete it, the wall clock above the nurse's station began to blink. It only did that for one reason. Ambulance signal detected at the main gate. I stood up fast. The doors at the end of the corridor whooshed open a moment later, and 2 orderlies pushed in a stretcher. A woman lay motionless on the gurney, face pale, skin streaked with dirt. She wore a cream-colored dress, stained dark near the hem, and her hands looked scraped like she had crawled. No one was speaking. I walked beside them to the exam room, grabbing gloves from the wall unit. "Did she come from a car accident?" I asked. "Where's the EMT?" But the orderlies just shook their heads. No record. No arrival notes. The driver, whoever had brought her, was already gone. We ran basic scans. No ID. No phone. Vitals were faint but stable. When I lifted her wrist to check the pulse manually, her fingers twitched. Just once. I remember freezing, thinking she was waking up, but her eyes stayed closed. I went back to the desk and entered her fingerprints into the database. Less than a minute later, a match popped up. Mallory Keene. No age listed. No known address. No medical history. Just the name. I stared at the entry log again. Patient 018. Just like it had said. Ada, 11:29 p.m. And that had been exact. Down to the second. I didn't know what unsettled me more. That she had arrived like a scheduled package, or that we had no idea where she came from. But I wasn't ready for what the rest of that night would bring. I asked around, hoping someone else had seen who brought her in. Maybe another nurse. Maybe a late shift EMT dropping her off without paperwork. But nobody had. No one even remembered seeing her come through the doors. One of the night shift doctors checked the ambulance roster. Her name was not on it. I pulled the security feed from the ER entrance. The timeline should have shown everything from 11:25 to 11:30. Instead, there was a 2-minute gap. Just black. The clip jumped from 11:27 straight to 11:29, as if someone had snipped out the exact moment she appeared. I went back to the intake terminal, thinking maybe I imagined the whole thing. Maybe I never saw the name until after she arrived. But the line had vanished. The entire row for patient 018 was gone. No Mallory. No timestamp. The list picked up again at patient 019. I sat there for a minute, just staring at the screen. I remember whispering to myself, "That's not possible." And right then, one of the older doctors strolled past behind me, saw the look on my face, and asked what was wrong. I told him a little. Not everything. Just enough. He nodded slowly, leaned on the counter. Then, he said something that made my chest tighten. Mallory Keene, that name sounds familiar. I think she was the last person registered at the old Somerset facility before it burned down. Halloween night, 1983. We never reopened that wing. This is walking. I laughed it off. Not because it was funny. I just needed something to push back the chill crawling up my arms. He smiled, but it was thin. Then he went to check on a patient, like he hadn't just dropped that fact on me like a stone. A little after 1 a.m., I was finishing notes and cleaning up my station. Most of the ER had gone quiet again. The woman in room 5, Mallory, if that really was her, hadn't moved. Still unconscious. Still no ID. I went back into the staff office to log out. That was when I saw it. The computer screen had powered back on. I had shut it off 30 minutes earlier. On the desktop, a new document was already open. It showed a patient log for the next night's shift. Only one name had been entered. Patient 019. Dana Whitmore. Female. Unknown injury. ETA, 11:29 p.m. My name. I clicked out of the file. Deleted it. The computer froze for a second. Then the document reopened itself. Same file. Same name. Every time I closed it, it came back. I left immediately. Left my coat. Left my notes. Just walked to the parking lot without looking back. I sat in my car until the sun started to rise. And when I finally went back in to explain what happened, nobody believed me. They told me there had never been any record of a patient named Mallory Keene in the system. Not that night. Not ever. But someone left a file folder on the front counter of the nurse's station. It was old. Yellowed. The paper soft from time. No one claimed it. No one knew where it came from. The first page held just one line, scribbled in faded black ink. Patient 018. Checked in. Never checked out. My name is Lorna May, and I live at the end of Willow Street in Evergreen, Alabama. The house is small and wooden, worn at the porch steps and soft in the roof from too many rains. 3 generations of women in my family passed through this place. My mother died here. My daughter was born here, and I stayed. My husband passed in 1999. Stroke. My daughter, Clara, left us in 2007. That one I don't talk about as easily. Every year since, Halloween meant one thing to me. Shut the lights, lock the doors, and let the night pass quietly like a bad memory slipping by. But in 2010, that changed. Halloween night. Midnight exactly. I was dozing on the sofa with the TV volume low when the doorbell rang. Not once. 13 times. Evenly spaced. Each one sharp and precise. I remember standing still for a long moment, unsure I had even heard it right. No one rings 13 times. It felt deliberate. When I opened the door, there was no one there. The porch light flickered. The wind was still. But lying neatly at the edge of the doormat was something I hadn't seen in over 20 years. My mother's old silver locket, the same one I had buried with her. I picked it up slowly, turned it over. The clasp was rusted, the hinge soft with age. Inside was the tiny photo of her and me at the lake. The chain still had the nick where I had caught it on a fence post as a girl. There was no question. It was hers. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe one of the neighborhood boys found it at a thrift store and thought it would be funny. But there was something else. On the back of the locket, in small, crooked script, was her name. Not engraved. Hand-scratched. A tiny detail only I knew. I should have told someone that year. I really should have. Because that was only the beginning. In 2011, it happened again. Same hour. Same rhythm. 13 chimes. Soft and deliberate. When I opened the door, the porch was empty. But placed carefully on the top step was a single white baby shoe. Clara's. Except I had burned everything after the funeral. Every piece of her clothing. Every keepsake. I remember standing behind the shed, feeding them into the rusted barrel one by one, letting the smoke sting my eyes until there was nothing left. But there it was. Untouched. Clean. And small enough to fit in my palm. I sat with that shoe in my lap until dawn. The next year, 2012, the bell rang again. I was no longer surprised by the sound. I almost expected it. This time, the object was a wedding invitation. Mine. The original one we had sent out before the storm ruined half the town. The real invitations had been destroyed in that flood back in 1982. We reprinted new ones after. But this was one of the lost ones. It still smelled faintly of river mud. By 2013, I decided to stop waiting. That Halloween, I made tea. I sat by the door, starting at 11:50, wrapped in my shawl, listening. I thought maybe I could catch whoever was doing it. Maybe I could understand what they wanted. I waited. At midnight, I watched the porch light flicker, and then it begins. Ding, ding, ding. The sound does not come from outside. It rings from inside the house. From behind me, from the old hallway chime I have not used in decades. The hallway chime had not worked since the 90s. I had taken the batteries out myself. And yet, that night, the sound was clear, almost musical. 13 tones, ringing out like a countdown I could not interrupt. I stood slowly and turned toward the hall. Nothing moved. No breeze. No shadows. Just the silence settling in after the last chime. I checked the wall. The chime was still unpowered, the wires dusted over. But it had rung. I heard it. That was the year I called my granddaughter. She was living in Birmingham and begged me to come stay for a while. I hesitated. But the next Halloween, I packed a bag and went. I figured whatever it was, a haunting, a memory, it would stay with the house. But I was wrong. At midnight, her doorbell rang. Once, then again, 13 times. We both stood in the hallway, looking at each other like we had both slipped into the same bad dream. I opened the front door with shaking hands. On the doormat lay a folded piece of paper. I knew that paper. I had written it in 1998, after my husband's first heart scare, a letter I never sent. I had kept it hidden behind the dresser for a while, then tossed it into the fireplace one winter morning when I thought I was ready to let go. Yet here it was. My handwriting, my words, unburned. After that, I stopped trying to explain it. Maybe it was my mind. Maybe grief had decided to take a shape and follow me. But the year after, 2015, no bell came. No object. No sign. I waited until 2 in the morning. Then I cried. I thought maybe it was done. Maybe the dead had said what they needed to say. Maybe silence was the real message all along. That peace lasted 1 year. On Halloween of 2016, I stayed home. I did not wait by the door. I did not make tea. But at midnight, the bells returned. Ding, ding, ding. This time, they ring from the porch in the hall at once. The sound wraps around the house like a tide coming in. I cover my ears, but I still hear it. 13. Always 13. I open the door. There is no object this time, just the dark. But drawn in chalk on the step below me is a message. Lorna May, it is time. Inventory. I do not remember moving. I do not remember how I got to the kitchen. But when I open my eyes again, I am seated at the table. And across from me sit my mother, my husband, and my daughter. We do not speak. Their faces are calm, warm, familiar. I blink once. Then they are gone. But the teacups are still there. 4 places set. Steam still rising. After that, I stopped fearing Halloween. Now, I set 4 chairs each year. I bake what I used to bake. I wait. No one sits. But each morning, the seats are warm to the touch. If they still remember me, then I am still here. They used to say Silas Hill had the best Halloween in all of West Virginia. Parades, house-to-house contests, bonfires so big you could see them from the ridge. My mom used to tell me stories about it, how everyone joined in. But after '88, everything stopped cold. 3 kids vanished that Halloween night. No bodies, no clues, just empty costumes found in a pile near the old mill road. Since then, the town council didn't just discourage Halloween. They banned it. No costumes, no pumpkins, no porch lights after dark. People still remember. Every October, the hardware store covers its mask aisle with plastic sheeting. The schools skip costume day. And if you ask anyone over 40 about it, they'll shake their heads and change the subject. In Silas Hill, Halloween wasn't forgotten. It was locked away. If you ever visit a place where everyone's scared of a certain day, don't push it. Even if it feels like a joke. Some locks are meant to stay shut. I was 22 that year. Just old enough to think I knew better. Young enough to believe nothing bad could touch me. There were 6 of us. Me, Ava, Cam, Elijah, Nikki, and Ray. We'd all grown up together. And we were tired of living under shadows cast by stories older than us. So we decided to break the rule. Not in town. Of course. We drove out past the ridge into the woods, where the town line ended. It was Halloween night, and we were going to have a real party. We brought everything: coolers, speakers, a folding table, and a cheap battery string of orange lights. Everyone wore some kind of costume. Nothing fancy. Cam had a skeleton hoodie. Ava painted her face like a witch. I threw on a cloak I found in a thrift bin. We lit a fire, passed around drinks, and started the music. It felt like we were getting away with something. That buzz you get when you're not supposed to be somewhere. But you're there anyway. And nothing bad's happened yet. The trees were still. The moon was high. We thought we were in control. Then Nikki found it, half buried near the base of a sycamore. A small, gray stone mask. It looked carved, but rough, worn down by time. The eyes were just hollowed ovals, and the mouth a narrow slit. Nobody could tell if it was supposed to be a man or a woman. Elijah said it looked ancient. Cam laughed, called it Mr. Halloween, and stuck it upright on a log in the fire circle. Everyone joked about it like it was some forgotten mascot. I remember the way the flames lit its face. The stone didn't reflect the fire like normal rock. It absorbed it somehow. Still, None of us said anything. Not really. We were already a few drinks in, and the music drowned out most of our doubts. Closer to midnight, something changed. It started with the speaker glitching, repeating the same loop over and over. A soft child's voice humming a tune none of us recognized. Cam tried to fix it, but the track wouldn't stop. Even when we disconnected the Bluetooth, it kept playing. The lights flickered too, not like batteries dying, more like a pulse, on and off, then brighter than before. Elijah muttered that it was weird, but Ray told him to relax. I remember looking over at the mask. I could have sworn its mouth was wider than before. Then Nikki swore she saw someone behind the trees, just standing there. She said the figure was wearing the same mask, staring from maybe 20 feet away. We turned our lights to the woods, but there was nothing there, just branches and dark. Cam went to check, said it was probably a deer or maybe one of us trying to scare the rest. He jogged into the trees, still holding his cup, still grinning like it was a game. We waited. A minute passed, then another. Suddenly we heard him scream, not playful, not like a prank, just a raw, short cry, and then nothing. We all jumped up and called his name. No answer. The fire crackled louder than before, like it knew something we didn't. 5 minutes later, his sweatshirt was there, sitting beside the mask, soaking wet like it had been dragged from a creek. But the ground was dry. No rain, no fog, nothing. Just that damp, lifeless cloth, steaming slightly in the cold air. We didn't argue. We didn't wait to see more. Ava yanked the speaker out of the dirt and the music finally stopped. Elijah kicked dirt over the fire, and Ray grabbed the cooler without even closing it. We scattered. I ran. We didn't plan how we split up. Panic did it for us. 1 second we were a group. The next, we were just bodies crashing into trees, yelling names, hoping someone answered. I remember Ava grabbing my hand before we broke into the lower path. The woods felt tighter the further we ran. Branches clawed at my face. Roots snapped underfoot. We were sprinting blind, and every few steps Ava would turn back to look behind us. I didn't want to, but I could hear it too. Footsteps that didn't match ours. Then her grip slipped. I heard her gasp, maybe trip. I turned around. She was gone. Not even a rustle. I called her name, over and over. Nothing. Just the smell of damp leaves and a sound like someone exhaling slowly from deep in the trees. My flashlight flickered once and went dark. I didn't move for a long time. Couldn't. All I could do was listen and try to stop breathing loud enough to be noticed. The woods had changed. They weren't silent. They were waiting. Every sound now felt deliberate, like something circling, choosing when to close in. I crawled downhill through brush and cold air. No light, no phone signal, just the memory of where the town limits were. I knew if I could get near the old fire road, I'd have a chance. Every few steps, I stopped to listen. Eventually, the trees began to thin. I felt gravel under my palms and pushed up onto what must have been the road's edge. I wanted to scream for help, but my throat locked tight. It felt like something was holding it from inside. I collapsed near the drainage ditch. My leg cramped. Breath caught in my chest. That was when I felt it. Someone was next to me. Not standing. Sitting. I turned my head. He is right there. Wearing the stone mask. Watching me. I can't tell if it is breathing. Its chest rises slow. Steady. But it never moves otherwise. When I finally meet its eyes, something happens. Not outside, but inside my head. A voice. Not words. Just the sound of my name being pulled like a string underwater. Why, Wyatt? It sounds like Ava. Or Cam. Or both. I don't know. Then I see headlights. Far off. A truck. Maybe. A ranger, doing his rounds. I blink. The masked figure is gone. But something rests in my hand. Cold, heavy. When the light passes over, I see what it is. The mask. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The ranger found me sitting against the mile marker, shaking but conscious. He asked if I needed help, if I was lost. I couldn't answer. My voice just didn't come. They searched the woods for days. No sign of Ava, Cam, Nikki, Ray, or Elijah. Not even footprints after a certain point. It was like they'd never been there at all. I still live in Silas Hill. People whisper when they see me. I don't blame them. I haven't spoken since that night. But I still have the mask. I don't mean to. I tried to throw it away more than once. It always finds its way back. And every year, on Halloween night, just before midnight, I hear it again. That same humming, the one the speaker played. A child's voice, soft and distant, floating in from the woods. It's never gotten closer. Not yet. Halloween was always slow for me. Folks didn't break their phones on purpose. But the mix of drinks, costumes, and curbside parties meant I got a few walk-ins every year. Most of them were cracked screens or water damage from spilled cider. Nothing strange, just business. It was around 3:30 inches the afternoon when she walked in. An older woman, maybe in her 70s. Coat buttoned all the way to her neck. Hair pulled tight into a bun. She held the phone out with both hands like it was something fragile or sacred. No case. Just an old iPhone 6 with spiderweb cracks across the glass. She said she found it the night before. Said it was sitting alone on a park bench near the East Side Trail. She didn't want a reward or anything. I just thought maybe I could figure out who it belonged to. I offered to check it out. The phone was dead. No surprise. I plugged it into my voltage-safe charger, one of those stabilizers that keep bad batteries from frying the port. After a few seconds, the screen lit up. No passcode, no lock. The camera app was still open. That part threw me a little. Phones rarely stay like that after being powered off, especially overnight. But there it was, the camera in selfie mode, frozen mid-frame like someone had just looked away. I backed out of the app and checked the photo library. That's when it got weird. There were over 300 photos, all selfies. Same girl in every one, maybe 20, maybe younger. She had heavy eye makeup, white, feathered wings, and a silver dress. Halloween costume. Obviously, a fallen angel. Maybe. The wings were torn. Her eyeliner smudged into streaks like she'd been crying. But what really stood out was how the photos were taken. One every few feet. It seemed across streets, down sidewalks, next to fences and cars and alleyways. Always forward-facing. As if she was walking through the night and snapping a picture every time she paused. Like she was checking something behind her. In some shots, she looked calm. In others, her eyes were wide, her mouth pressed tight. The further along the timeline I went, the worse her expression got. She was scared. You could see it happen. Around photo 250 or so, she was crossing a familiar area. The mural wall behind Keller's Diner. Then the footbridge near the creek. Then she was back in a residential zone, where the streetlights were farther apart and shadows stretched longer between them. By photo 290, she wasn't centered in the frame anymore. She was angled, like she kept turning mid-step. Each photo came quicker, seconds apart. In number 304, her face was sweaty, flushed. Her mouth was slightly open. And in 305, the last photo, she wasn't looking at the camera. Her head was turned over her shoulder, just slightly. Her eyes fixed on something just behind her. Not in panic, more like resignation. And there, in the far edge of the frame, was a sliver of something black. A shoulder. Maybe fabric. Maybe not. It didn't match her costume. There were no more photos after that. No videos. No voicemails. Not a single outgoing or incoming call. I checked the Notes app. Empty. Calendar. Blank. I hesitated. Thought maybe I should just wipe it, clear the phone, and turn it in. But something about that last photo stuck with me. The way her eyes weren't afraid exactly, more like they had already seen too much. As I held the phone, I noticed something else. In the black reflection of the screen, I could see my face. And just for a second, it looked like someone else was behind me. I turned. There was nothing there. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the phone hadn't finished telling me something. Like I had picked up a story halfway through. And whatever happened wasn't done happening. I closed the photo app and set the phone aside. It was almost 7, and the street outside had gone quiet. No trick-or-treaters came this far down the road. Not since the gas station closed 2 years ago. The only light came from my desk lamp, soft and yellow. I told myself I'd reset the phone first thing in the morning. Still, my eyes kept drifting toward it while I worked on other repairs. Around midnight, I heard a soft buzz from the counter. The old iPhone had powered itself on again. I hadn't touched it. The screen glowed faintly, the same way it had when I first connected it. The battery icon read 1%. Somehow, the Photos app had opened by itself. I reached for it. My fingers hesitated over the glass. The deleted folder was full again. Every single photo had reappeared. The girl, the streets, the same terrified look, all restored automatically. My hands started to sweat. I selected Delete All and cleared the trash. I watched them disappear, one by one, until the screen was blank. When I backed out, the phone vibrated again. The folder had refilled. This time, only one photo. It was dark, blurry, taken in my shop. I could make out my own counter in the background. I unlocked the camera to test if maybe the sensor was malfunctioning. As soon as I opened it, the phone took a picture on its own. The flash went off, bright and sharp. I blinked, blinded for a second. When the image appeared, I stopped breathing. The room was empty, just my bench, the door, and the reflection of the front window. But in that reflection, there were 2 silhouettes. One was me, the other was taller, standing directly behind. I dropped the phone. I remember hearing the click of the shutter again before it hit the floor. The photo app opened automatically. Each time I tried to turn it off, it would take another picture. The flashes strobed across the room, painting everything white and then dark again. I grabbed the power cord and yanked it out. The screen went black. I told myself it was over, that I'd just lost my mind for a second, and I went upstairs to sleep. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that faint outline behind me. At 2:40 a.m., the alarm went off. Motion detected downstairs. I ran down barefoot, heart hammering. The lights were flickering in the shop. No one was there. The phone was sitting on the counter, right where I had left it. Only now, it was on again, glowing bright white. I reached for it slowly, half expecting it to burn. When I picked it up, a new photo notification appeared. Taken 2 minutes ago. It wasn't the girl this time. It was me, bent over the desk, phone in hand, exactly as I was standing now. The angle came from behind my shoulder. I looked around the room. Empty. The security camera in the corner blinked its red light. Later, I checked the footage. It showed me alone the whole time. No second figure. No movement behind me. Just me. I should have thrown the phone away right then. But I didn't. I pulled the battery out instead, sealed it in a drawer, and told myself that was enough. For a year, it stayed there, silent, until last Halloween. At 11:54 p.m., I woke up to a faint light leaking from under the shop door. When I went down, the drawer was open. The phone lay on the counter, face up. It had no power source, no battery, yet the screen was on. One new photo, my reflection again, from behind, taken in that exact moment as I stared at it. Sometimes I wonder if that girl ever looked at her last photo before she vanished. Maybe she saw what I'm seeing now. And maybe that's why there's never just one person in the frame anymore. My name's Calvin. I've been working the night shift at the Missouri State History Museum for just under 3 months when Halloween rolled around. Before this, I spent 6 years in Afghanistan, doing 2 deployments with the Army. When I got out, all I wanted was something quiet, routine. Still, that museum gig fit just right. Big rooms, low light, and the kind of silence that made some folks uneasy. Not me. I liked the stillness. You learn to trust it after a while. Halloween night, I was the only one on shift. Management didn't say it outright, but people avoided that date when the schedule came out. Something about bad luck or bad air, they said. I laughed it off. I've walked through minefields. I wasn't about to lose sleep over a few mannequins and dusty war medals. It was just after 11 when I did my second patrol of the night. The building was quiet, lights dimmed to half bright. I turned into the Native War exhibit, one of the older wings, with creaky wooden floors and a dozen glass cases. That's when I saw it. A bow, part of a mounted display, had shifted. It was supposed to hang flat against the velvet backing, but now it leaned at an angle, and the string was stretched tighter than before. Not broken, just wrong. I stepped closer, inspected the mounting clips. They were still locked in place. I adjusted the bow, set it back the way it should be. Then I went to the office and pulled the security footage for that section. The feed showed everything clearly, up until 11:08 p.m. Then, just static. 3 seconds of pure whiteout. After that, the bow was tilted. I wrote it off. Loose fixture maybe, or some careless kid touched it during open hours and no one noticed. Still, I added a note to the logbook. Always better to keep records, even for the small stuff. The night dragged like usual. Around 11:45, I made another loop. Same route, but this time, something else caught my eye. There was a clay statue in the corner of the exhibit, a replica of a captured native warrior, bound at the wrists, positioned to face the center of the room, where the American soldiers were displayed. Only now, he was turned. Not fully, just enough that his gaze lined up with the exit door. I stood there for a long moment, certain I was not mistaken. That statue had always faced inward. I checked the floor for scuffs or drag marks. Nothing. When I pulled the camera feed, it showed that same 3-second static window. Nothing before. Nothing after. Just a new angle when the screen came back. I didn't tell myself it was normal this time. I didn't even bother trying to rationalize it. But I didn't panic either. Soldiers are trained to keep their pulse steady. I made another note in the log. Walked the rest of the building. Everything else looked untouched. Then at 12:03, something new started. From my office, I heard tapping. Not loud. Not random either. It was rhythmic. Light. Like someone using a wooden stick to knock against plaster. I paused the report I was typing and leaned out the door. The sound came from the same wing, the Native War section. I walked fast. No flashlight. No hesitation. When I reached the display, I stopped cold. Every wooden object, every bow, every carved mask, every ceremonial axe had fallen to the floor. None of the glass cases were broken. The support brackets were intact. There was no reason for any of it. But there they were, laid out across the floor like someone had swept them all off in a single motion. I stood there in that dead quiet, breathing slow, staring at objects that should not have moved. Not without hands. Not without someone opening the glass. But the cases were sealed. Perfect. And I swear, in that moment, the air around me felt heavier. Like the room was not empty anymore. Like something else was waiting for what I would do next. I turned every light on in that wing, top to bottom, even the emergency beams. My boots echoed sharp across the floor as I moved through each display, checking for signs of tampering. Everything was intact. No broken locks, no forced panels, just the objects, back on the floor, where they had no business being. I tried calling the supervisor. No answer. Not surprising, but I left a voicemail anyway. Kept my voice calm. Clipped. Old habit. Back at the security desk, I pulled up the live camera feeds. Every wing looked normal, until I clicked on the Native War exhibit again. The display cases were empty. Not vandalized. Not opened. Empty. 5 seconds passed. Static. When the picture came back, all the objects were back in place. Exactly where they started. As if nothing had ever happened. I sat back, heart beating in my ears. I didn't reach for the logbook this time. I just stared at the screen and waited for it to happen again. But it didn't. Eventually, I poured a mug of black coffee and sat in the break room. Put on some old country music, real low. Scribbled in a notebook I kept on me. Nothing official, just private thoughts. For 15 minutes, the museum was quiet, still. I almost convinced myself I had overreacted. Then the alarm triggered. Not the main doors. Not motion in the lobby. Just one section. Native War exhibit. I grabbed the flashlight and ran. By the time I reached the hallway, the lights had cut out. Only that wing. The rest of the museum still glowed in soft yellow light. But this section was dark, like something had drawn a curtain across the whole space. I stepped inside and swept the beam across the cases. And I stopped breathing. One of the stone carvings, a large tablet etched with black soot and ash, had changed. It used to show a nameless soldier standing in a circle of fire. That was the official plaque, a symbolic tribute. No known face. Now the face was mine. Not just similar. Not a trick of shadow. It is my face. Every line. Every scar. Even the ridge of the nose I broke back in '09. Carved in stone. I step back hard. The flashlight slips from my hand and rolls across the floor. When I pick it up and shine it back on the tablet, the face is gone. Just the original carving again. The soldier. Faceless, surrounded by fire. But behind the glass, on the back wall, I noticed something new. A handprint. Wide, dusty, fresh, pressed against the inside of the glass like someone had tried to push through. The fingers trailed downward slightly, just enough to show motion. Not posed, not a display. I backed out of the room without another word. Locked the exhibit door behind me, left every light on. That morning, I filed a full report. I told them what I saw. They reviewed the footage and claimed there were errors. Data corruption. They said there were no visual anomalies. Nothing wrong with the displays. No reason for concern. But they closed the Native War exhibit. Indefinitely. I still work there. Still take the night shift. But when October comes around, I use my vacation days. People think it is fear. It is not. It is respect. A soldier knows when to fall back. Not because the fight is lost, but because the ground you are standing on was never yours to begin with. The bus dropped me off at Edge Hollow just before 8:30. A quiet little town near Montpelier. Colder than I expected, with fog curling low over the sidewalks. I stepped down the metal stairs with my costume bundled under my jacket. Even under the wool, I could feel the rough texture of the stitched-up sleeves and fake blood stiffening at the elbows. I had spent 3 days making it. A zombie getup for Halloween, all hand-stitched and layered. With latex scars, I molded myself and a custom-painted mask that looked half-rotted. Go all in or go home, I told myself. Art students don't get many chances to show off outside campus. My friend Lena was supposed to meet me at the stop. Her house was only 3 blocks away, straight down Maple Street and past the little wooden bridge that crossed the creek. But when I called her, it rang twice, then straight to voicemail. I didn't think much of it. It was Halloween. Maybe she was at the party already. So I started walking. The night had that kind of chill that made sound carry differently. I could hear my boots tapping on the wooden planks of the bridge, the creek moving beneath. I adjusted my mask so it wouldn't fog up my glasses. That was when I heard the footsteps behind me. Even measured, a little too perfectly spaced. I turned, expecting a local kid or maybe another partygoer on the same path. Instead, I saw 5 figures in the dark. At first, I thought it was a mirror trick. Every single one of them wore a costume just like mine. Same white mesh gloves painted with black veins. Same torn jacket with a red patch at the left hip. Same mask. They moved slowly, not close enough to be threatening, but just there, always 4 or 5 steps behind. I stopped. They stopped. I smiled nervously, raised a hand. "Nice costumes," I called out, half laughing. "You guys from the party?" They're calmed down by. No one answered. They didn't even tilt their heads or change pace, just stood there, half shrouded in the streetlight's fog. When I turned and walked again, they followed. Same rhythm, same distance, like they were tethered to me by invisible thread. I tried different tricks. Slowed down. They slowed down, took an abrupt right onto a gravel path. So did they. It wasn't playful. It felt practiced, intentional. The road curved toward an unfinished development. Half-built homes and concrete shells left behind when the project ran out of money. There were no working street lamps here, just raw beams, bare wood, and broken fencing leaning into the dark. I didn't want to cut through, but it was the fastest way to Lena's power. I figured if I picked up the pace, I could lose them. So I did. I walked faster, breathing harder through the mask. My hands tingled inside the gloves, and I tried not to look back. I kept telling myself it was just a weird group with the same costume idea. It was Halloween. People get creative. Halfway through the empty lot, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned. They were gone. Not fading. Not hiding. Just not there. No footsteps. No echo. No shadows stretching from behind. The road was silent. The wind picked up, brushing dry leaves across the gravel. I looked to both sides. No one. I walked in a circle, checked behind the nearest framing wall. Nothing. It was like they had dropped off the face of the earth. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I should have. Then I pulled my jacket tighter and started running. I didn't stop running until I saw the glow of the convenience store sign ahead. The glass doors slid open, and I stumbled inside, catching my breath, pretending to check the drink cooler so I wouldn't look insane. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I dialed Lena again. This time she picked up on the second ring. I could barely hear her over the static, but I managed to say where I was. She told me to come straight to her place, that she would leave the porch light on. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. When I hung up, the front camera on my phone flickered to life by itself. For a second, I thought I had brushed the screen, but it stayed on, facing me. The fluorescent light above hummed softly. Then the image shifted. Behind me, in the reflection, were 5 figures, each of them dressed exactly like me. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor hard, screen first, and slid under a shelf. By the time I picked it up, the camera was off. I didn't check it again. I just ran. Lena's house was only a few blocks away. The porch light glowed warm against the fog. When she opened the door, she laughed and said, I looked like I had seen a ghost. Maybe I had. I tried to tell her what happened. About the people on the bridge. About the photo. But she waved it off. You've been traveling all day, she said. You're exhausted. It's Halloween. The town's full of copycats. They signed. I wanted to believe her. So, I washed the makeup off, changed into a plain sweatshirt, and joined the others in the living room. Music, laughter, cheap candy, all the normal things that make you forget the dark for a little while. The others joked about my zombie outfit, saying it looked too real. I smiled, but it didn't feel right. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet, I went to the bathroom. The mirror over the sink was slightly fogged from steam. I wiped it clean and leaned in, tired but calmer. For a moment, I thought maybe I could laugh about it all. Then I froze. There is someone behind me. The mirror shows them clearly. A figure in the same torn costume, head slightly bowed. Standing so close I can see the edges of the mask where the glue had started to peel. I feel the air in the room shift. My reflection doesn't move. My breath catches. I turn. No one is there. But in the mirror, we are still two. I grab a towel, fling it over the glass. Heart pounding. It slides off, revealing the same scene again. My hand shakes as I reach for the edge of the mirror, pressing against it like I could force it to change. Then I do the only thing that feels right. I slam my fist into it. The glass splinters. A sharp crack echoes through the house. Lena and the others rush in, half asleep, asking what happened. I stand there, bleeding slightly from my knuckles, staring at my reflection, or what's left of it. The mirror is fractured into dozens of little panels, and in each one, I see something that shouldn't be there. Two figures, always two. After that night, I swore off costumes. I told myself it was a panic attack, maybe stress or lack of sleep. But sometimes, when I walk past a car window or a glass door, I catch a glimpse of something just over my shoulder. A faint shadow that looks a little too much like me. Every year around Halloween, someone sends a photo to my college email. It's always the same. Me, in that zombie costume, standing in the middle of a crowd I don't recognize. And every year, the crowd looks a little closer. You ask me about Halloween? I used to think it was just some city folk tradition meant to scare kids into behaving. Costumes, candy, all that nonsense. But out where I worked, at the old mill near the Redwood line, the scariest thing didn't wear a mask. That place was nearly 10 miles from the closest town. Dirt roads, thick forest, and a sawmill that had been around longer than any of us. I worked there 12 years. Started in the early 70s. First few seasons, it was just a job. Hard hours, decent pay, nothing special. But every October, the old-timers would start joking. They'd say, "If you hear the dragging wood on Halloween night, don't go looking. It's not meant for you. It's Sester." We'd laugh. I mean, how scary could a plank of wood be? My third year, I stopped laughing. I remember it real clear. October 31st, just before midnight. Most guys were already gone, but I had stayed late helping shut down the machines. I was in the brake shed, halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee, when it started. A sound. Slow, heavy, like thick wood being dragged across concrete. Not rolled, not dropped, dragged. One long pull at a time. I stood up and opened the shed door, thinking maybe someone had left a pallet on the ramp. The sound wasn't coming from outside, though. It was deeper in, near the saw room. The others had warned me. Of course. Said it happened every Halloween, always around the same time. They blamed it on old tracks, warped steel, maybe animals messing with loose tools. No one ever checked. That night, I didn't either. I left early, got in my truck and went straight home, feeling stupid for how tense my shoulders had gotten. Next year, same thing. Around 11, that dragging sound echoed again through the mill floor. Different guy on shift heard it too. No one went to check. It became this thing we joked about, but always left alone. Then came Ben. He was new, maybe 22. Came in midsummer. Fast learner. Always asking questions. Good kid, but stubborn. the kind that needed to see things for himself. That Halloween, we warned him like we always did. Told him about the sound, the dragging. Ben just smirked and said, "I know what wood sounds like. I used to run summer camp carpentry. You old guys probably just heard wind." We let it slide. Thought maybe he'd spook himself quiet. That night, only 4 of us were still around. I was back in the brake shed when it happened again. The dragging. Closer this time. Not distant. Not muffled. You could feel the vibration in the concrete. Ben stood up, grabbed a flashlight, and said, "I'll go check it out. Just to prove there's nothing." "It's too prick." I told him not to. So did the others. But he grinned, waved us off, and walked out into the mill. We never saw him come back. We waited 5 minutes before following. 5 long minutes of silence except for the hum of the cooling saws and the faint creak of metal settling. The dragging sound had stopped. I remember glancing at the clock. 11:27 on the dot. We called his name first. Ben. Then louder. Nothing came back. The mill was open space. Sound should have carried, but it was like shouting into a sponge. Everything soaked up before it reached the walls. We spread out, flashlights sweeping across the floor. There were no footprints beyond the ones he left from the office. No signs of struggle. Just a single mark that caught my eye near the main floor. A groove. Thin. Shallow. About 6 inches wide. Cutting straight through the dust, across the cement. It ran all the way toward the old storage bay. The one we had locked the season before. Nobody had gone in there for months. I followed it until my light hit the door. The metal latch was still sealed tight with rust, but the mark stopped right against it, like whatever made it had passed straight through. That was when I felt something. Not a sound, not a draft, just a shift, like the air itself leaned in to listen. I stepped back. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. We called for him until our throats went raw. The next morning, police came. They brought dogs, trackers, even divers for the nearby creek. Nothing. Not a shoe print. Not a scrap of clothing. Only one glove was found wedged under a pallet near the wall, covered in sap, thick, sticky, and darker than any tree resin I'd seen in that place. They said maybe Ben wandered off. Maybe he panicked and ran into the woods. But the woods had no trail marks either. The case just sat there, open and unsolved. 2 months later, I was back on night shift. A cold evening in December. I walked into the mill, and there it was, Ben's flashlight, sitting neatly on a workbench, still glowing faintly, like it had been left on all that time. It made no sense. The batteries should have died weeks ago. We had fixed the security cameras by then, hooked to a new generator. Out of habit, I checked the tape from Halloween night. Every feed looked normal until 11:19. Then static. 8 full minutes of whiteout. When the picture came back, Ben was gone. After that, the mill stopped hiring in the fall. No one said it was because of him, but everyone knew. Now, every year when October rolls around, I can still hear it. That slow scraping across the floor. Always at 11:27. Always from the old bay door. And I never go closer than the threshold. Not anymore. Ben was a good kid. Kind. Curious. He just didn't believe us. If I could go back, I wouldn't joke about the dragging sound. I'd tell him plain and serious. Some things out here aren't meant to be followed. Because whatever made that sound, it wasn't trying to scare us away. It was calling someone in. My name's Karen. I was 34 that year, still living alone in a second-floor apartment, just 2 blocks from the Winona Public Library. I'd worked there 7 years, and most nights, I was the last one to lock up. I liked it that way. The quiet after closing felt like a slow exhale. Halloween landed on a Monday that year. Rain started mid-afternoon, And by 6, the sidewalks had emptied. The windows fogged slightly from the inside, and the old furnace ticked to life every 20 minutes. We usually stayed open until 8, but past 7:30, not a soul came in. You ever notice how a place changes after hours? The lights hum louder. The carpet swallows your footsteps. And the books? Well, sometimes I think the books wait until we're gone to breathe again. I was shelving returns when I heard the first sound. A single, heavy thump from the back corner. The local history section. I paused, one hand still on a mystery novel. Waited. Nothing followed. Just a book falling. I figured. It happened. The older shelves in that wing had a bit of a lean to them. The floor dipped near the radiator, and when someone slammed the back door too hard, like that delivery guy sometimes did, things slipped. Still, it was late. I had already turned off the overheads in half the main floor, moving room by room with my little flashlight clipped to my sweater. At 8:02, I reached the end of the history aisle and saw the book lying there. Face down, brown hardcover, cloth bound, no jacket, no label on the spine either. I bent to pick it up. The book was cold, almost damp, like it hadn't been touched in years. When I opened the front cover, there was no title page, just a blank cream page. And at the center, written in smooth blue ink, "Open again this year. I'm still here." In Crealps. I read it twice before I really understood what it said. The handwriting looked old-fashioned. Round loops, precise spacing, like someone had practiced penmanship in another era. I looked for a barcode, a catalog stamp, anything to tell me where this book belonged. There was nothing. No publishing info. No library ID. Not even a date scribbled in pencil like the older donations sometimes had. The next page was completely blank too. No page number. Just creamy paper that looked oddly porous under the flashlight. I checked the back of the book for a printing mark, but the spine was worn smooth. The cloth nearly threadbare in the center, like someone had scrubbed it down on purpose. I didn't like the way it felt in my hand. Too still. Too quiet. I told myself it was an old diary someone misplaced on the shelves. Maybe a patron stuck it there and forgot. I slid the book under my arm and turned to finish locking up. That's when I heard it again. A soft clink behind me. The sound of something small hitting the tile near the front desk. I walked back slowly, trying to stay logical about it. When I rounded the corner, I saw the pen. A simple blue ballpoint. It had rolled under the chair where I always hung my coat. I knew it was mine. The same kind I kept in the right pocket of my fleece jacket. Only now, my pocket was unzipped, empty. I picked it up. That same blue ink. I held it beside the writing in the book and felt my skin tighten. The ink matched exactly. Then, I swear, the book opened itself. Not violently. Just a soft shift in my arm, the pages fanning slightly, and the paper settling again. The inscription was there, but now it was on a different page. The first page I'd seen, blank. I snapped the book shut, stuffed the pen in my bag, and locked the thing in our small metal archive cabinet in the back. The keys rattled in my hand, and I double-checked both bolts before I left. I didn't turn off the last light that night, and I didn't look back at the shelves. Not once. The next morning, I came in early. Rain had stopped, but the air felt heavier somehow, like the fog hadn't lifted off the river yet. I went straight to the archive cabinet before even turning on the desk lights. The book was gone. I checked twice, opened every drawer, every shelf in that little back office. Nothing. The only thing out of place was a faint smell, like old cedar and dust. Something that didn't belong in a room, cleaned weekly. I walked out into the main floor, not sure what I was even looking for. The building felt still. I tried not to glance at the back corner, but my eyes kept drifting there. That section was always cold in the mornings, but now it felt cold in a way that reached inside your sleeves. And there it was, On the shelf labeled Local History 1921. Same brown cloth cover. Same blank spine. I pulled it out with the tips of my fingers. The weight of it made my wrist ache. I opened the book. A new line was written. Same blue ink. Same handwriting. You looked in the wrong place. I am not in the book. I am what remains. I shut it again. Didn't shelve it. Didn't try to explain it. Just carried it back to the front desk and sat with it in my lap for nearly an hour, trying to decide if I was imagining things. That afternoon, I brought it up to Janice, the other librarian. She laughed, told me I needed sleep. I laughed too, but not because I found it funny. I didn't tell her the part about the ink matching my pen. Later that week, I brought in my old magnifier, the kind with the small LED ring and scratchy switch on the handle. I told myself I just wanted to understand what kind of ink it was. What kind of paper? Under the lens, the letters looked almost carved. Not pressed by a pen. Not printed. Not absorbed. Just darker, deeper shadows in the grain. Like the paper had remembered something it was never supposed to hold. That unsettled me more than I can explain. Words without source. Ink without matter. I closed the book and left it on my cart. Refused to shelve it again. A few days passed without incident. The book stayed quiet. Halloween faded, and the air began to shift into November chill. I started to think maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Until the 7th. That evening, I stayed late again. Just 30 minutes past closing, finishing returns and setting up the winter book display. I was reaching for a plastic sign holder when I caught movement outside. Across the street, under the yellow street lamp, someone stood perfectly still. They wore a gray felt hat, pulled low over their face. A long coat. They were holding something in both hands. And even from behind the glass, I could see it. It was the book. I stepped around the counter and opened the front door. "Excuse me," I called. The street was empty. No footsteps. No breeze. Just the smell of dry leaves and exhaust drifting down from the hill. And at my feet, resting neatly on the top stone of the library steps, my blue pen. Same scratch along the side from where it got caught in the drawer last spring. Same slight bend in the cap. I didn't pick it up. I locked the door, turned off every light, and walked home without looking back once. Now, every year when Halloween comes, I make sure I am never the one on closing shift. I do not check the local history section. I do not shelve any book without a barcode. And I never, ever pick up a blue pen I did not place myself. But still, every October 31st, one book is returned without a slip. Brown cloth. No spine label. Quiet as dust. I don't open them anymore. I had lived in that house for a little over a year. One story. Pale blue siding. Narrow driveway. Backyard that dipped into a patch of woods. Gainesville's got this thing where every third house looks like it came out of the same blueprint. But mine felt different. It felt like I had finally closed a chapter, after the divorce and everything that came before it. It was October 30th, a Monday. Morning was humid in that Florida way, like the air had nowhere to go. I made my coffee, scrolled the usual feeds, then stepped out to check the mailbox around 9. That was when I saw it. There was one envelope that didn't fit. Bright orange. No stamp. No return address. Just my first name written in a looping black pen, centered neat as a typed label. I looked around. No one was on the street. A squirrel darted across the road. Leaves skittered against the curb. I opened the envelope on the spot, expecting some late promotion or seasonal junk. It was a Halloween card, one of those old-fashioned kind. Black cat. Full moon. A grinning jack-o'-lantern wearing a top hat. But the inside was blank. Except there was a photograph tucked in the fold. It was my house, taken from across the street, in daylight, probably late afternoon, You could see the open window in the front room, curtains pulled back, light hitting the glass. I recognized the angle because I park right there every day. But what made my finger stop wasn't the house. It was the figure in the window. Not clear, not detailed, but unmistakable. Someone standing inside my front room, staring out, wearing a pumpkin mask. I blinked and brought the photo closer. The light caught the gloss of the print. I hadn't worn a mask like that, ever. I hadn't had anyone over. I lived alone, and I never opened that window. I had sealed it last winter, after a leak in the frame. I took the photo inside, laid it on the table and stared at it while my coffee went cold. Okay, someone's idea of a joke, maybe a neighbor, or a friend from work, maybe a leftover from the previous owner, some local kid messing around. Still, the photo felt too specific, too deliberate. I turned it over. Blank. No writing. But the texture of the print caught my attention. Not glossy like a drugstore order. Slightly matte. Thicker. Like it had come from a dark room. That part got under my skin more than I wanted to admit. I went online and pulled up the old listing for the house. Found the photos from the ad I responded to, back on Facebook Marketplace. There it was. That same window. That same open curtain. That same slant in the roofline. But the match was exact. I mean, down to the trim color and the uneven paint spot on the left shutter. The thing is, I painted those shutters myself. 3 months ago. I zoomed in. In the photo from the envelope, the shutters were still the old color. Faded red. Chipped near the middle. Which meant the picture had to have been taken before I moved in. At least 2 years ago. Still thinking logically. Maybe someone used an old photo. Something from the city archives. Or a neighbor's collection. I drove into town and brought it to a local print shop. Asked them about the paper. The guy at the counter held it up to the light. He frowned. Sniffed the edge for some reason. Then ran his thumb across the surface. Print like this. With this kind of ink sink. He said. I'd say minimum 2. Maybe 3 years old. Not something done lately. It's so... I didn't know what to say. I thanked him and walked back to my car with the envelope folded in my pocket. Drove home slower than usual. That night, I made sure the curtains were closed tight. I turned on the porch light, locked every door. Told myself again and again it was just a joke. But near midnight, the motion light on the porch flicks on. I'm not asleep. I'm on the couch, half watching some rerun, just trying not to think too hard. I freeze. I walk to the door and peer through the peephole. No one. I open it, just enough to check the step. The photo is there again. Same image. But now, there's a new crease running diagonally across it. Like someone held it tighter this time. I tore the photo in half. Then, quarters. Dropped the pieces into the kitchen trash and took the bag straight outside. The night air clung to my skin like wet cloth. I locked the lid and went back inside, double-checking every bolt before trying to sleep. The next morning, I ordered a camera. Nothing fancy. Just a doorbell unit with a motion sensor and cloud storage. I installed it by noon and tested it twice. It pinged my phone perfectly. By Halloween night, I was tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. The other kind. I kept the porch light off. Kept the curtains drawn. I even unplugged the pumpkins I had lit the day before. At 11:57 p.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected. I tapped the screen, but the feed just spun in circles. No signal. No playback. When it finally reconnected, the timestamp had jumped to 12:02 a.m. I went outside anyway, flashlight in hand, scanning every inch of the yard. No one. But when I opened the mailbox, I found another envelope. Same orange color. No stamp. My name written in the same black pen. My stomach dropped before I even touched it. Inside was a single photograph. My bedroom window, taken from the backyard, through the gap in the privacy fence I had meant to fix. The curtain was slightly parted. I could see my own bed, my pillow, the way the blanket folded down when I sat up too fast. I ran back inside and slammed the door, locked every window, closed every shade. Then I called the police. They sent a patrol car within 20 minutes. 2 officers checked the yard, made notes, asked if anything had been stolen. I told them about the envelopes, the photos, the gaps in the camera footage. They looked at each other. One of them shrugged and said maybe someone had a ladder and knew when I slept. They filed a report. That was it. I didn't sleep. Around 4 in the morning, I sat in the dark living room with a baseball bat across my lap and the TV flickering blue. That was when the screen changed. No static, no flash, just a sudden image. The photograph again, but different. I see myself in the frame, standing at the front window, looking out. I remember that moment. I remember watching the patrol car pull away. What I don't remember is the figure behind me. Pumpkin mask, standing just inside the hallway, tilted head, shoulders crooked, like they had to duck to clear the door frame. I jumped to the remote and yanked the USB drive from the TV. It was still the one I used for old movies. I hadn't plugged anything new into it. The photo was never there. The sun came up around 7. By 8, I had packed a bag. By noon, I had booked a short-term rental across town. I left that house within 3 days. Sold it to a couple who said they liked the quiet. They called me once, months later, said they found a photo in the mailbox. Halloween night. Showed the 2 of them asleep in their living room. Someone had taken the picture from outside, through the window. Halloween that year felt colder than usual. Not freezing, just the kind of cold that made the plastic masks sweat inside and the candy wrappers stick to your fingers. I was 13, and for the first time, Mom let me go trick-or-treating without an adult. It was just me and Julia. My sister was 16 then, and everything she did seemed twice as cool as it should have been. Julia always walked ahead of me, a little too fast, her laugh bouncing off the pavement like it belonged there. She wore a black witch's hat that kept sliding sideways, and every time I fixed it, she winked like we had a secret. That night, we went through 3 blocks, house to house, under a sky just dark enough to feel like something special was happening. The neighborhood glowed with orange porch lights and inflatable ghosts. We passed kids in superhero capes and glowing skeleton suits, parents holding coffee cups and leashes. It felt warm, almost magical, like the whole street had agreed to stay kind for one night. Julia kept saying, "This is what real Halloween feels like." And I believed her. We reached the end of the street around 8. Most houses were dark now. Porch lights clicked off. Candy bowls empty. All except one. The house at the far corner had a single light on. Not orange. Not yellow. It was a soft blue, barely more than a glow. Like something underwater. Julia slowed down and tilted her head. "That one," she said. "I remember that place. Is way for saps." She pointed at the porch. "When I was little, I came here with Dad." The lady gave out the big chocolate bars. Like, full size. They y into the one. The made a difference to Steven, with the buying contention of gone. I hesitated. The house looked older than the rest. The porch sagged a little in the middle, and the bushes out front were dry and too tall. Something about it made my stomach pull back. Just slightly. "I'll stay here," I said, trying to sound casual. "You go." Is it knowing never way from comment? Julia grinned at me, all teeth. "Scaredy cat," she teased, but there was no bite in it. I held both our candy bags while she climbed the short steps and knocked. The door opened quietly. I couldn't see inside, just the edge of yellow wallpaper and a dim hallway. Then Julia stepped in without a word. The door closed behind her, slow and soft like it had always been meant to do that. I stood there alone, the bags getting heavier by the minute. The wind picked up, The light on the porch flickered once, then returned to that strange blue. I kept checking the time on my phone. 5 minutes passed, then 6. The door opened. Julia came out, holding something wrapped in foil. She smiled as she walked toward me. Not rushed, not slow, just even, like her feet knew the distance before she took each step. "You okay?" I asked, trying to hide how nervous I had been. "Yeah," she said. "The old lady's still nice." "That's 7, indeed at Rabber." She handed me the candy, a silver-wrapped bar with no label. "Full size," she added, and smiled wider. But something was off. Her voice sounded right. Sure, but the way she moved was too smooth, too exact. Her arms stayed at her sides a little too long, and her smile never quite reached her eyes. And the way she looked at me, or didn't. She talked as we walked, but her gaze never landed where it should have. It was like she was looking past me, through me, saying all the right things in all the wrong ways. It felt like she was pretending to be herself. I cracked a joke about one of the decorations we passed, a goofy zombie wobbling in the wind, and normally she'd elbow me or roll her eyes. Instead, she just said, "Yeah," and kept walking. Not a single laugh, not even a glance. I didn't say anything after that, not until we were 2 houses from home. That's when she spoke again, still cheerful, still calm. "Don't tell Mom about the house," she said. "Okay." Then we chatted. I nodded, unsure. But then she added one more thing. Same voice, same steady tone. But the way she said, "Mom," it came out strange. Like she had never said it before. Like someone trying it out for the first time. I tried to tell Mom the next morning. I told her about the house, the blue light, how Julia had gone inside and come out different. Mom just smiled tiredly over her coffee and said, "Sisters see things differently sometimes." She asked if we had argued, if that was why I was upset. I didn't know how to explain that it wasn't an argument. It was something else. Julia acted normal that day, or close enough to normal that it confused me. She hummed while she brushed her hair and complained about homework, like nothing had happened. I waited for her to mention the house, but she didn't. It was like it had vanished from her memory entirely. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened her candy bag while she was in the shower. Every piece was untouched, perfectly arranged, like someone had packed them by color. And then there was one silver-wrapped bar at the bottom. No label, no brand. Smooth foil, pressed flat, like it had never been folded by hand. I touched it and pulled back immediately. The metal felt warm. A few days passed. Julia laughed again, joked again, but not quite the same. When I mentioned going back down that street, she stopped mid-step. Her eyes flickered for a second, then softened as she smiled. "That house," she said lightly. "I never went inside. You must be remembering wrong." That was gassed. It wasn't teasing. It was a correction. Like she was adjusting the story to make it fit some new truth. I told myself I must have been mistaken. Maybe she had only stepped onto the porch. Maybe the blue light came from another house. I wanted to believe that. For a while, I did. Then came the night of November 3rd. It was past midnight, and the house was quiet. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the kitchen. Soft, slow, measured. The kind that only made noise when the heel met the tile. I thought Julia was getting a glass of water. I got up, tiptoed down the hallway. The kitchen light was off, but I could see her shape standing by the window, framed in that faint glow from the street. She was facing outside, her back straight, her arms at her sides. The window above the sink reflected just enough of her face that I could see her mouth moving. "Julia," I whispered. She didn't turn. I stepped closer. Then I heard her voice. A whisper, almost tender, but wrong somehow. "Next year you'll come with me," she said softly. so I won't be alone. Thanks for watching. I froze. Her reflection in the window blinked, but the real Julia didn't. The air in the kitchen grew heavy, like it had swallowed all the warmth in the house. I backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. When I reached the hallway, I ran straight to my room and locked the door. I stayed awake till morning. Light on, blanket pulled to my chin. Mom said it must have been a dream, but I knew better. I still do, because sometimes, when the power flickers near Halloween, I catch that same faint blue glow leaking through my blinds. And every year since, Julia sends me a card, always the same message, in her neat handwriting. See you next year. Halloween was always one of the quieter days on my route. Folks tended to stay in, or they were already out with their kids. Porch lights were off more often than on, and most people ignored the door even when I rang. I liked that. Honestly, less small talk, more efficiency. That year, I was wrapping up my last delivery run near Stanley. Mountain roads, thick trees on both sides. The kind of place where headlights barely made a dent after sundown. My final stop was a remote cabin off the main road. About 15 minutes into the woods. No porch lights. No sign of movement. The GPS was glitchy around that stretch. But I knew the way. I had delivered there once before. Some kind of fishing gear, if I remembered right. This time, the name on the manifest stopped me cold. Malcolm T. Turner. That was my name. Same first name. Same last initial. Same full surname. At first, I figured it was some weird coincidence. Maybe someone typed the wrong name during checkout. But when I tapped into the system, the recipient address matched my home address exactly, right down to the zip code. And then the part that really messed with me. The delivery status said signed, M. Turner, 5:52 p.m. I looked at the clock on my dash. It was 5:49. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Then I looked back at the box. Standard brown package. No sender info. No company logo. Just a clean label printed with my name. And the signature line was already filled. I scanned the label. Just to log it. The app chirped. Status marked as delivered. Fine, I thought. Maybe it was a system glitch. Maybe someone was playing a joke. I stepped out of the truck and followed the path through the trees. The cold was creeping in fast, and the last light of day was leaking behind the ridge. When I reached the cabin, the front door was ajar. Not fully open, just slightly swung in, like someone had stepped inside and forgot to shut it. Ups, delivery, I called out. No answer. The box was already inside, sitting right in the center of the floor like someone had placed it there with care. The cabin was quiet, almost too quiet. I stepped in just far enough to grab the package and turn back. That was when I saw the slit in the tape. It had been opened. Neatly. The seal cut clean with a blade, but the flaps were tucked closed again like someone wanted it to look untouched. I picked it up, lighter than I expected. Barely anything inside. Still, I felt something shift when I tilted it. A dull, sliding weight. Not metal, not glass, just something moving softly against cardboard. I stepped back outside and set the box on the porch, pulled out my flashlight, angled it down. There was a wooden box inside. Small, polished, looked handmade, and right as I leaned in closer, I heard it. A faint rustle, coming from inside the wooden box. Not from the wind, not from the trees. From inside. I backed away, part climbing into my throat. I should have left then. Should have walked back to the truck without a second thought. But I didn't. There was a slip of paper taped to the cabin door. I hadn't noticed it before. I peeled it off and held it to the light. It was a delivery confirmation form. Signed, Malcolm Turner. And the signature looked exactly like mine, only stiffer, like someone had practiced it by watching me write. I left the paper fluttering against the cabin door and ran straight back to the truck. My boots slipped once on the gravel path, and I nearly dropped the scanner. I jumped in, locked the doors, and fired the engine. The heater blasted against my neck, but I still felt cold all over. I tried calling the dispatch line, but the bars flickered in and out. No service. The GPS screen blinked twice, then turned gray. I stared at the signal icon, willing it to stabilize. Nothing. When I turned around to check the back seat, my heart stopped. My delivery bag had been opened. Everything spilled across the seat. Clipboard, scanner, spare gloves. And resting in the middle of it all was another box. This one slightly smaller, but the label was unmistakable. To Malcolm T. Turner. The address was not my house anymore. It was the cabin. I picked it up. It was warm. Not room temperature warm, but body warm. Like it had been held tight for a while. No return address. No postage. Just that same clean font, and the edges too crisp to have been handled by any machine. I opened the door, stepped outside, and flung the box into the snowy ditch across the road. I watched it tumble, then vanish beneath the white. My hands shook as I reached for the wheel. But when I looked back, the cabin was gone. Not boarded up, not collapsed. Gone. There was only a wide, shallow clearing, a few scattered stones. No wood, no steps, no porch, nothing that looked like it had ever been a structure. I blinked hard, pulled the truck around, made it to the main road in half the time. Didn't stop until I was back at the depot. I told myself it had to be a trick of the light, a GPS glitch. Maybe I had mixed up addresses, ended up somewhere else without realizing it. That was the only thing that made sense. A few days later, I asked to see the depot's security footage. I needed to know if anyone had tampered with my truck. The manager hesitated but pulled the clips. There I was, on camera, loading the last few deliveries before heading out. And then, just before I left, another man stepped into frame. Same jacket, same gait, same face. He picked up a small box from the back wall, turned slowly toward the camera, and walked out of frame. Not a single word, not a glance at the workers around him. They never saw him come in, and they never saw him leave. I took a leave of absence after that, told them I needed time, and they didn't ask questions. But Halloween came again a year later, and so did another package. No return label, no tracking ID, just my name. Inside was a slip of paper. Thank you for delivering on time. See you soon. I moved, changed cities, took a desk job. But the next year, same day, it happened again. The package always finds me. Always silent. Always blank inside. Except for that one note. Right on schedule. I do not celebrate Halloween anymore. I do not send mail. I do not sign anything unless I absolutely have to. And every year, I wonder if one day the box will not be empty. I grew up in Fall Branch, a small mountain town tucked so deep into Kentucky that even the radio gave up trying to reach us. People there kept to themselves. Stories moved through porches and pews instead of books or news. And everyone knew one rule on Halloween. You never opened the door after 9. That was not a superstition. It was a reminder, repeated so quietly and so often that it never felt like advice. It felt like something sewn into your bones. My grandfather said it best. Every October 31st, as he turned off the porch light, he would look at me and say, "If you hear 3 knocks, spaced just so, 3 minutes apart, do not open that door. Not the same night, not the next morning. Just leave it shut." We had to our thing. They called it the 3 knocks debt. No one in town ever explained what the debt was, or who was owed. All I knew was that anyone who ignored the warning lost something. Not a person, Not a thing you could replace. It was always something harder to name. That year, I was 17. First time I asked to stay home alone on Halloween. My grandparents were only a few houses down, checking on a neighbor who had slipped on her porch steps. I wanted to prove I was grown enough to handle one quiet night. I passed out candy till the younger kids stopped coming. Around 10:30, I turned off the lights and curled up on the couch with a book. The house was warm. The street was silent. At 11:12 p.m., the first knock came. It was slow. Not a tap. Not a pound. Just one firm sound, like someone polite but sure of themselves. I waited a minute, peeked out the front window. The porch was empty. Probably some leftover trick-or-treater, I told myself. Someone late. Or lost. I went back to my book, though my fingers held the pages tighter than before. At 11:15, the second knock came. Same sound. Same rhythm. Nothing between. Just one knock. Then silence. I put the book down. My heart thumped a little faster. I got up, checked the back door, then the windows. Still, no one outside. No cars in the driveway. No footsteps in the leaves. That was when I remembered something else my grandfather had said, long ago, in a lower voice than usual. The third knock does not ask to be let in, he told me. It counts. It checks. It's not knocking for permission. It's knocking to see what is left. Even Tensaville. At 11:18, the third knock came. It sounded softer this time, or maybe farther away. But it was clear. One measured thud, followed by complete silence. I turned off every light, locked every bolt. I slid down behind the couch and pulled a blanket over my head, pretending I was still little enough to believe that hiding could keep things out. I stayed that way until dawn. When morning came, I opened the curtains. Everything looked normal. The porch was just as I had left it. No prints, no notes, no packages. I almost convinced myself it had been a dream, until I sat down at the breakfast table. The picture was gone. It had always sat beside the window, tucked into the frame of a wooden box my grandmother called a family altar. A photo of my mother, the only one I still had, her in a yellow sweater, holding me as a baby, both of us caught in a sunbeam I could almost still feel. Now, the frame was empty. I asked my grandparents if they had moved it. They hadn't. My grandmother touched the altar like she was trying to feel something that wasn't there. My grandfather just looked out the window, jaw tight. "We told you not to open the door," he said. "I didn't," I whispered. "I know," he replied. But it still came. It's the taps. I searched the whole house that day. Every drawer, every cabinet, even under the floorboards in the back room where my grandfather kept his old tools. The photo was nowhere. I even looked in the garbage, thinking maybe it had fallen or been swept up by mistake. But it had not fallen. It had been taken. I went to talk with Mrs. Claiborne, who had lived on our street since before my mother was born. I asked her about the 3 knocks, if she knew where the story started or if anyone had ever gotten something back. She gave me that look older folks in Fall Branch had. Not pity, not warning, just tired truth. "Every year, the house hears it," she said. "Not always the same house, not always the same thing, but no one ever talks long about what they lost." Afra quieted dear. "And if you don't answer," I asked. She just shook her head. "You already did. By listening, this is around, Doc." A year passed. I finished school, helped around the house, started to forget the sharp edges of that night. Most days I told myself I had imagined it, that I misplaced the photo, that maybe, deep down, I wanted something strange to happen. But the strange part was not what left. It was what began to fade after. I could not remember my mother's voice. The sound of it used to come back to me in dreams, or when I passed the cedar tree she planted before I was born. But now, no matter how hard I tried, the voice was gone. replaced by a silence I could not explain. That Halloween, I did not stay home alone. But at 3 in the morning, long after the candy had been put away and my grandparents had gone to bed, I woke up in the dark. 2 knocks. Not 3. Just 2. I waited, holding my breath under the covers, afraid of the third. But it never came. When morning broke, I walked to the kitchen. My hands felt cold even though the fire had not gone out. I did not smell breakfast. I did not hear the usual creak of my grandfather's chair. But I saw the photo, resting on the dining table. Same frame, same soft edges, same yellow sweater. Only now, my mother was sitting alone. The background was not the sunlit porch from before. It was our current living room. She sat on the couch, hands in her lap, eyes turned slightly away from the camera, and no one else was in the frame. No photographer, no light, just her, still and quiet, in a place she had never lived to see. I did not touch it. I did not ask if anyone else had seen it. I left it there, because deep down, I knew what it meant. I never opened the door the next morning, but I still heard things sometimes. Soft knocks in the distance, slow and patient, and always counting. Because whatever it is, it has not finished yet. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.